The chieftain and both sisters cried out at that, and the clansmen close enough to hear started whispering to each other and passing it back through the crowd. I stood there completely baffled. A minute ago, these people were shooting arrows into me, and now the whole yard was looking at me differently. If I was reading one man's face correctly, what he was showing me was envy. The chieftain threw his axe on the ground, ordered his people to put away their weapons, walked up to me and bowed. He asked, with his eyes burning, whether I truly meant for them to become residents of my territory. The whiplash was so violent I nearly told him I had preferred the version of him that would rather die. It was obviously not the moment for jokes, so I nodded and confirmed it, repeating that they would become my territory's residents and would not be discriminated against for being White Cat Clan. Then he asked whether there was any way I could prove my identity, and my expression went cold, because after all this the man was still testing me. I asked him flatly what reason I could possibly have to deceive him now. He regretted the question the instant it left his mouth. He had been too excited to keep hold of his own tongue, and the words had come out on their own. He gave me an awkward smile and apologized, blaming his excitement and his failure to think before speaking. So I asked the question that actually interested me, which was why his attitude had swung so hard the moment he heard the words trial taker. A man who had been ready to die rather than kneel was now handling me like something breakable. He started with his clan's history. He said through clenched teeth that some of the sea plunderers were lords who had failed their trials, and that others were merely the henchmen of lords. Between them, they committed every evil there was, stripping valuables off particular islands and, when it suited them, taking people away to sell as slaves. I said, more than a little exasperated, that he had evidently taken me for a sea plunderer, and that this entire mess had grown out of a misunderstanding. He clearly saw it the same way by then. His own prejudice had done it, since he had decided what I was and never once let me speak. And the farce had played out in front of 300 people. Watching him squirm, I let it go and asked him instead whether he was submitting to me now. He said that of course he would, as long as I guaranteed his people would be territory residents and enjoy every right that came with it, since that was all he needed. So I gave it to him formally. I declared that I accepted the White Cat Clan as residents of my Heya territory and guaranteed them every fair treatment that Heya territory's residents enjoy. I said it with a straight face and I meant it. Then I told him to send everyone home and find us somewhere to sit and talk properly. He dismissed the clansmen and led me and Windsor and the others back into the attic building. There were a good number of rooms up there, and since only one had been wrecked, the rest were enough to house my people for the night. I had no intention of leaving the White Cat camp before daylight. Moving through that jungle at night would be dangerous no matter how strong my escort was, and I would be moving 300 people who mostly could not fight. Mayo Ryong and her sister went off to sort out sleeping arrangements for Windsor and the others, while I went into a side room with the chieftain. I told him he still had not explained the part I actually asked about, which was why he had gone from refusing me to chasing me the moment he heard the words, trial taker. Outside, he had explained why he refused so stubbornly, and nothing at all about why being a trial taker made me worth serving. That was what I wanted. And underneath it sat the question I still had no answer for, which was what exactly a trial taker was in the first place. The White Cat Clan leader had braced himself for the question, and he admitted straight off that he had guessed why I called him aside. He took a moment to line up his thoughts, then opened by asking me who I thought the noblest people on the Lord continent were. I told him lords, since that much was obvious to anyone who had lasted a week here. He nodded and said there were actually two kinds of lord walking the continent. I kept quiet and let him lay it out, and he explained that anyone holding a territory could be called a lord, though their identities were not remotely the same thing. The first kind were first-generation lords like me, summoned by Qianmo, handed a territory core and confirmed as official lords once the trials were passed. Those were called heavenly mandate lords. The second kind were descendants of that first generation who seized a stretch of land, planted a territory of their own, and declared themselves lords. Those were called trial takers, mostly children of heavenly mandate lords, who refused to live ordinary lives. I asked what actually separated the two. He said heavenly mandate lords were favored by heaven itself, which in plain speech meant favored by Chanmo. Everything we owned could be raised along the rules she set, with city walls and territories and buildings all going up the moment the materials were there. He said trial takers got none of that treatment and stood about where his own tribe stood, building every wall by hand and by their own strength. What set them apart from tribes was that they carried the qualification to become something close to a heavenly mandate lord, and once certain conditions were met, they could claim most of the same privileges. He had no idea what those conditions were. That answered a question that had bothered me since I landed, since I had never understood why a trial taker would sweat over a camp if the result was no better than a tribe's. The road to heavenly mandate treatment was the reason, and while it would never be an exact match, it beat staying a tribe by a long way. I asked him whether his whole change of attitude came down to my being a heavenly mandate lord. He confirmed it at once and quoted a saying that had spread across the Lord continent, that heavenly mandate lords represented all possibilities. His eyes were shining by then and his voice had gone up half a step. For him, running into a heavenly mandate lord at all was a stroke of enormous luck, and running into one who had only just planted a territory was better still. He told me that if the White Cat clan served the Lord like that well, his tribe would be reborn. He was clear-eyed about the risk. Heavenly mandate lords enjoyed very good treatment, but rights and obligations balanced out, and the people under one carried the corresponding responsibilities. He said that even knowing it, tribes across the continent schemed and begged for the chance to become subordinates of such a lord, because the bigger the risk, the bigger the return. Their predecessors had already set the example, and he named the Skywing Bird Clan. They had followed a heavenly mandate lord and gone from a scrap of a tribe on some island to one of the 10 major tribes standing on the Lord continent today. Every small tribe now wanted to walk the Skywing Bird Clan's road and end up a great tribe in their own right. He had that road sitting in front of him and had no intention of letting it slip, since it might carry the White Cat clan into the sky. He added that he could see for himself that I was strong, and that the people under me were nothing to sneer at either. That was why he had been so eager to show me his loyalty, and why he told me all of it so I would understand exactly what my identity was worth. I asked him outright whether he believed I could lead the White Cat clan and make it grow. He said he was deeply convinced of it, in a tone with no give in it at all. It was strange to sit there and realize this old cat had more confidence in me than I had in myself. So I teased him, asking whether he worried I might be lying to him, or that I might sell his tribe out whenever it suited me. He gave me a look I could not read at all. When I asked what the look meant, he said that whether he had surrendered that day or not had never really mattered, since it only changed the route. He was right. Resist or submit, his people were going to end up mine, and my question had answered itself before I finished asking it. I changed the subject fast. I told him that if he submitted to me, I could grow the White Cat clan's numbers and make a portion of them genuinely strong. Talk of joining the 10 major tribes of the Lord continent, though, sounded like a pipe dream. I considered myself the undisputed first among the new lords, and even so, turning one small tribe of cat people into a continental power was not a promise I could make. He answered without a flicker of doubt that if I wanted to cultivate the White Cat clan, then it would happen. After a short pause, he added the condition, that I keep growing until I became a true overlord-level lord on the continent. I muttered to myself that there was something buried in this I did not know yet. I did not push him for it, because a small tribe's leader was never going to have that information. Overlord-level heavenly mandate lords in the top 10 tribes were the apex of this world, and his standing did not reach anywhere near them. He understood that I had stopped asking him and kept quiet. I let the matter drop as well, since I was a lord who had barely started, and none of that was mine to worry about yet. That said, if the chance came, I would not mind raising the White Cat clan up, because they were my people now. The promise I had given the leader was not talk to fill a room, and I meant every word of it. I told him to go and bring Mo Ryong and her sister to me. He had already given me both names when we walked into the pavilion. Something crossed his face and he made himself ask why I wanted the two of them. He knew I was his lord now and that his clan would only lean on me harder as time went on. He knew perfectly well that if the sisters attached themselves to me, it would be a fine thing for the White Cat clan. But he had raised Cat Shadow and Mo Ryong as his own granddaughters, and he was not willing to trade their happiness for his tribe's advantage. I read all of that off his face and got a little annoyed. Did I look like a lecher? If I had been that man, I would not have left Mori alone when I ran into her the night before. Windsor and Dark Moon would have both said, without hesitation, that I was genuinely interested in Cat Shadow and her sister, and they would have been right. I made my expression stern and told him he was thinking far too much, that I had called them because I was curious about Mo Ryong's talent and wanted to hand Cat Shadow an opportunity. A trace of doubt stayed in his eyes, but he stopped arguing, nodded and walked out. I watched him go, knowing he had not swallowed a word of it. I could hardly blame him because I really did think that way. I was interested in both sisters and had no intention of pretending otherwise, though I was not the sort of man whose legs stopped working at the sight of a pretty face. I had no reason to rush either. Everything would happen on its own schedule. I did not wait long. The two of them came in and stopped about 3 paces away, and their eyes stayed on me with open caution the whole time. The leader had clearly said something on his way out. I skipped the pleasantries and took the awakening stone disc out of my storage ring, then set 10 purple crystals into the 10 indentations along its face. I told Cat Shadow to stand on it, and she looked at her sister first, waiting for Mo Ryong's nod before she stepped up. Honestly, their distrust was earned. My first impression on them had been about as bad as first impressions get. I had slipped into their pavilion uninvited, taken their White Cat chieftain hostage, then killed the 4 demon beasts he controlled in front of everyone. I've left a real shadow on both of them. The purple crystals melted down into the disc, and the same light from the night before rose around her. The sisters went stiff, plainly not understanding any of it, though neither dared move with me standing there. The disc fell silent. Cat Shadow hopped straight down to Mo Ryong, and her sister looked her over carefully before letting out a breath. I asked Cat Shadow whether she felt anything different in herself. I already knew the awakening had taken, so the question was really there to sand down their guard. I thought well of both of them. Mo Ryong I was still unsure about, but Cat Shadow read as genuine epic quality, the first epic commoner I had ever laid eyes on. Her panel put her at level 5 with strength 34, agility 37, and defense 35, and her profession came up as florist. Her listed abilities covered tending gardens, pruning flowers, and a broad knowledge of plants, and her talent was named Whispers. Mo Ryong shot her sister a worried look, since she could not see anything different and thought something had gone wrong. Cat Shadow said softly that she felt she had gained a great deal of knowledge about flowers, and that she seemed able to understand the information flowers gave off. Both of us were stunned, for different reasons. Mo Ryong because she had lived through the same thing herself the previous day, when her own talent awakened, and now watched her sister get one from the man in front of her. Her gaze on me turned complicated. She had heard her chieftain describe heavenly mandate lords as all but omnipotent for years, and seeing one hand her sister a talent still felt like a trick of the light. My own surprise came from the talent itself. I had assumed Whispers meant carrying confidential messages, not listening to flowers. I asked her whether she could actually communicate with them, and she answered without the wariness she had walked in with, since I was apparently the man who had given her this. She said she could speak with flowers, but not many times a day yet, and only while standing face to face with them. That told me everything I needed about her ceiling. If her strength climbed, she would be able to talk to plants whenever she liked. There was a strong chance she would eventually form a perception domain and reach every plant and flower inside a radius. On a sea island covered in green, that made her an information network with legs. It was my own guess and nothing more, though I believed it would come true. All of it waited on her growing stronger, so for now I wanted a demonstration. I was honestly curious what flowers had to say to each other. I went to the bedside, lifted the potted plant off the headboard, and carried it over to her. I asked what she could pull out of it. Mo Ryong watched with open curiosity, since she had never seen anything half this interesting, and Cat Shadow was just as eager, having spent the whole previous day envying her sister. She stepped up, laid her hand above the plant, closed her eyes, and a jade-green light gathered over her fingers. After a while, she opened her eyes. She reported with the most awkward expression I have ever seen on a cat girl, that the plant was bored out of its mind. There was not a single female flower anywhere near it, and it felt like it was suffocating. Mo Ryong's ears went red. I put the pot back on the headboard rather quickly and decided that appetite really is the same in every living thing, right down to houseplants. I coughed twice into the awkward silence and changed the subject. I asked Mo Ryong 3 things at once: what her talent was, how she had awakened it, and whether she was carrying something that blocked detection, since I could not read her information at all. Those were the questions I actually wanted answered, because between the 2 sisters she interested me more. She blanked for a second, then caught up and told me that the day before, out gathering medicinal herbs, she had found a cave with 2 things inside it. One was a smooth little stone giving off golden light, and the other was a round white jade ring. The stone had broken into faint golden points the instant she touched it and sank into her body, and knowledge came with it. When she got back, the White Cat chieftain told her she had awakened her talent. Then he added that she might not have awakened anything of her own, and that the stone might have simply handed her one. I nodded, since it followed. This world had awakening stones that woke talents and talent orbs that granted them, so a talent stone that granted one outright was hardly a stretch. Going by her description, hers had been gold quality. The girl's luck was ridiculous. I asked about the jade ring. She unbuttoned her coat and tugged a thin string up from around her neck, drawing the ring out from against her chest, and I found somewhere else to put my eyes for a moment. She handed it over and said she did not know what it was either, that she had worn it because she thought it looked nice. With the ring in my palm, I checked her information again, and this time the whole panel opened up. Epic quality, level 6, strength 40, agility 41, defense 39, profession alchemist, abilities covering planting, identifying medicinal herbs, and concocting potions, and a talent named Chaos God. I asked her what the talent actually did, and whether illusions like the one she had thrown at me were the whole of it. Chaos God is far too grand a name for parlor tricks. She thought I was raising the attack against her and started explaining in a hurry that we had been enemies then, and that I had taken her grandpa. I cut her off and told her I did not care about any of that, that I only wanted her abilities clear so I could plan around them properly. The truth is I admired the attack. She had called out to me deliberately, waited for the half-second my attention slid, then struck, and that timing proved she was worth watching. We were enemies at the time, so of course she came at me, and she had done me no real harm anyway. She studied my face until she was satisfied I meant it, then relaxed. Somewhere in there she developed a bit of goodwill toward me, the approval a subordinate gives a leader rather than anything between a man and a woman. Her clan had pledged itself only hours ago and I had already handed her sister a talent. She told me she could do more than illusions, that she should be able to strike directly at another person's mind. Only those two abilities had surfaced so far, and being weak, she could use the mental attack once a day and it did not hit hard. I had shaken off her illusion quickly because I had merely been careless, so I knew her current strength was nothing much. Grown into that talent though, she would be a monster. Anything that goes straight for the mind is frightening on principle. With that settled, my eyes went back down to the jade ring in my hand, which still held a trace of warmth. I put the spirit eye on it. The panel called it the Moonlight Jade Ring, a special item accidentally crafted by a blacksmith named Hyun Chung-ja, and it carried two effects. It concealed the wearer's information, cultivation fluctuations included, and worn long enough it nourished the body and slowly improved physical quality. The concealment was not weak, since keeping enemies guessing about your strength is a genuine deterrent in most situations, but the second effect was on another level entirely. Slowly improving physical quality meant steady attribute growth for as long as it sat on your skin. That made it a long-term treasure rather than a trinket. Mo Ryong's fortune ran deep if she could pick that up on an herb run, and that was before counting a gold-quality talent stone in the same cave. I handed the ring back to her. She glanced at me with a flicker of surprise, having clearly assumed I would keep it for myself, and I did not bother explaining. The item was good without being good enough to make me pocket it in front of its owner. Beyond that, I wanted both sisters loyal to me down to the bone, so I was not about to dent my own image over a ring. I waved them out. Once the door was shut behind them, the sisters traded a look in the corridor, and there was surprise and joy in both faces. The surprise was for the man who had invaded their camp days ago and now ran the White Cat clan, the so-called Heavenly Mandate Lord, turning out to be kind. The joy was simple arithmetic, because a lord who was both powerful and kind meant the White Cat clan would profit enormously. They walked off with light steps, none of the tension they had carried in. I lay back on the bed. I had 300 transformations to spend tonight, but first I wanted to look at the three things I had fished up that morning. Windsor had already passed them over, and I had dropped them into my storage ring. The first was a fan with blue-green ribs and a white face, painted with an ink landscape of green mountains and trees. The panel called it the Green Wind Fan, green quality, and said a wave of it released a blast of blue-green wind that attacked the soul. Usage conditions, none, which meant I could wield it myself. I decided against burning 100 transformations on it. Green quality would most likely come out at blue, and the new function might well be worse than equipment that strikes at the soul. So the Green Wind Fan stayed as it was, and it stayed mine. The second item was stranger, a single drop of silver-white liquid that floated above my palm, giving off a faint glow. The panel named it Mystic Origin Magic Liquid, purple quality, a special spiritual substance of the Lord Continent. It could be worked into city walls, buildings, and weapons, with a chance of granting special magic effects. My eyes lit up and then dimmed just as fast. Magic effects baked into my walls would harden the territory enormously, but a chance is not a promise, and one drop was never going to reach that far by itself. So I specified the type and used 100 transformations on it without hesitating. Golden light passed, and a new item stood on the floor. It was a cylinder with grooves cut down its sides and an indented cylindrical hollow at the top. 1 meter across, 1.5 meters tall, purplish gold all over. The magic liquid origin pool, gold quality, and the description was 2 lines long. Adding different materials produced mystic origin magic liquid with different functions. Short text, enormous news. 1 drop of the stuff had just turned into the thing that makes the stuff. Given enough materials, I would have a permanent supply, which meant walls and defensive structures carrying magic effects, and a defensive line nobody would enjoy hitting. There were apparently many kinds of the liquid, each with its own effects, and since I did not know one from another, I would be finding out by trial and error. The last item was a small green stick no thicker than my thumb. It looked like wood, but squeezing it told me it was far harder than wood, closer to a metal. Spirit gold, blue quality, a special mineral material commonly used to improve equipment quality. Another material, and a scrap of one at that. Since it was useless in that quantity, 100 transformations was the obvious answer. Gold light flared, and my eyes went wide, because the thing had critically struck and come out gold. That put Mo Ryong straight back in my head, the girl who had walked out of this room 10 minutes earlier. Had I caught her luck somehow? I even wondered whether she was hiding a talent for fortune, or whether she was simply favored by something. Then I shook the nonsense loose. She had rattled me into an absurd idea, and that was all it was. She had almost certainly stumbled into one lucky run that would never repeat, and here I was crediting her for my own critical strike. Could it not simply be my own luck? Was I not allowed to be the luckiest man on this continent for one night? I gave my lack of confidence a sound scolding and told myself all of this belonged to me. The item in my hand was a small bottle of light gray liquid, thumb thick and about as long as my middle finger. Quality enhancement fluid, gold quality, which was dripped onto equipment to raise its grade, with gold quality fluid able to push equipment as high as gold. I looked at it for a long moment with my eyes shining. I had just picked up a fan that attacked the spirit and soul, and here was exactly the bottle needed to make it more than it was. And there she was in my thoughts again, that absurdly lucky little cat girl. A wry smile got away from me. Why did every good thing route through Mo Ryong in my head? It made me more careful rather than more suspicious, and I decided to keep a closer eye on her from now on. It was not that I thought she meant me harm. She was obedient to the White Cat clan leader, and the leader had thrown in with me wholeheartedly, so nothing was coming at me from that direction. Still, something about her was odd if she surfaced every time my luck spiked, and since I could not crack it, I set it aside. I took out the green wind fan and poured the quality enhancement fluid over it. The gray liquid did not run down the ribs and onto the floor. It sank in slowly instead, and when the last of it vanished, the fan had changed. The ribs had taken on the color of white jade while the face stayed white, and the paintings on both sides were gone, replaced by two black and white inkworks. One side showed a large white fish in a black sea, and the other showed the exact inverse, a large black fish in a white sea. The white fish had black eyes, and the black fish white ones. They were simple images that carried a strange weight, and I stood there a while taking them in. This was not the green wind fan any longer. The panel named it the Yin Yang Jade Fan, gold quality, special equipment that acted on the spirit and soul and carried several skills. Waving the white fish side released Yang Fish Revelation, which healed and restored damage to spirit and soul. Waving the black fish side released Yin Fish Swallowing Radiance, which devoured an enemy's spirit and soul. Waving the fan itself formed the Yin-Yang Boundary, which trapped enemies inside with no way out while the Yin-Yang Wind ate at their bodies. There was a warning attached that its power scaled with the strength of the user, and that forcing it carried the risk of backlash. I could not keep the grin off my face reading it. The fluid and the fan had been a perfect match, and what came out of the pairing was frightening. The Yin-Yang Jade Fan added nothing to my attributes the way ordinary equipment does. And even so, I did not rate it a step below gear that did. If anything, I put it above my heavenly dragon spear. The backlash was its one flaw, and set against those three skills it was a small price. Unless it was life and death, I would not push past my own limit, and used inside my limit, the fan would still hit like a hammer. I put it away and took out another blue quality item, the last one in my stock. If nothing blue came in from now on, I would be down to running 100 transformations on green quality junk. Wang Mok's trade list had been empty of blue for a while, which was its own quiet disappointment. Nothing to do about it but take things one step at a time. The item was a map, marked with mountain ranges and rivers, and one treasure site, clearly a chart of some island. I had no idea which island it belonged to, and knowing would not have helped, since I could not go anywhere to explore right now. For the moment, it was worth nothing to me, so this time I did not specify a type, and chose a random 100 transformations instead. The purple light faded and the map in my hand had become a transparent sphere, 10 centimeters across, floating over my palm. What was I supposed to do with a glass ball? The panel called it the Myriad Map Treasure Pearl, purple quality. Carried on the person, it automatically recorded the surrounding terrain and environment, and formed a map from it, and it could store a large number of maps besides. That changed my opinion in a hurry. Exploring the island the day before yesterday, I had wanted the ground properly recorded. I do not know the first thing about drawing maps, so I had scratched rough outlines onto sheets of white paper. They were usable and nothing more, and an inaccurate map is the kind of small error that turns into a large disaster. With the pearl in my pocket, I only had to walk the island and accurate charts would build themselves. And accurate charts make every plan I draw twice as cheap. I put everything away and closed my eyes to sleep. Then someone knocked. I got up and opened the door on Windsor in a purple nightgown, cut low enough to show a line of snow-white skin, and my eyes lit up before I could stop them. I had not expected her to come looking for me. She caught me staring and colored slightly, shy even after everything between us, though she has never once been coy. She smiled, stepped inside and shut the door, then asked in that sweet voice of hers whether I had looked my fill yet. There was no holding back after that, and I picked her up and carried her to the bed, and the night ran long. When I opened my eyes the next morning, Manhwa had arrived at some point and was sitting there in a red nightgown eating breakfast by herself. She beamed at me the moment she saw I was awake. I let it be and said nothing. Windsor surfaced a little later to find Manhwa nearly finished with the food, and Manhwa cheerfully wished her a good morning and offered to share what was left. Windsor walked straight out without a word, since Manhwa's bluntness is more than most people can take at that hour. Manhwa and I cleared out shortly after. Once I had washed up, I ate at the center of the camp with the White Cat clan leader and the others. Over the meal, we went through the state of the White Cat camp and planned the move to Heya territory. Partway through, I noticed Cat Shadow was missing. The leader and Mo Ryong noticed at the same time and wondered aloud how she had vanished in the space of a blink. Neither of them was really surprised, since she had never in her life been able to sit still. Mo Ryong guessed she had wandered off somewhere again and told me a few stories about her sister's habits. I smiled and let it go. Cat Shadow had left the meal for the clan leader's pavilion. She moved fast and kept checking over her shoulder, wearing the face of somebody with a guilty conscience. The door of the room I had used was unlocked, which let her breathe again, and she slipped inside, glanced out once more, saw nobody in the corridor, and shut it behind her. Then she went to the bed and picked up the potted plant off the bedside table, the very plant I had handed her the night before. She sat down with the pot in her lap, her eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. She put her right hand on it, green light gathered on her fingers, and she closed her eyes and began to draw the information out. That was the whole reason she had walked away from breakfast, to find out what the new master of her clan had done in this room the night before. Her expression kept shifting as the information came. Shock first, since she picked up something about the 100 transformations I had used. Surprise next, when she learned Windsor had come by. After that, her face turned red, her white cat ears twitched, and her tail swung faster and faster behind her. Then it stopped, because she had reached the limit of what her talent could do in one sitting. She set the pot back on the table and muttered to herself that she had not expected the Lord to be so bad. Then she sat there in a daze, not remotely recovered from what she had just watched. Reading a segment of memory out of a plant was a new trick, something she had worked out on her own the night before by practicing in her room. That was exactly why she had been so desperate to test it here. She had wanted to understand the man now ruling the White Cat clan, and one evening in the same room had traded her fear for curiosity. She came back to herself, remembered where she was sitting, and panicked. She knew she had to get out before somebody caught her. She was halfway to her feet when the door sounded, and she went to dive under the bed. Only her legs gave out and dropped her flat on the floor instead. She looked up into me, Windsor and the rest of them, along with her own chieftain and her sister, and every face in the doorway was staring at her. She would have crawled into a crack in the floorboards if one had offered itself. What she did not know was that hiding would not have saved her, since the gap in strength between us meant she would have been found in a heartbeat. I stood in my own doorway looking at a cat girl sprawled across my floor, blank for a second, and then asked her what she was doing in my room. The leader barked at her to get up. She looked ready to cry, because her legs still would not hold her, and Mo Ryong crossed over and pulled her upright. I took a chair and sat down, more curious by the second, and told her she still had not answered my question. She stammered and got nowhere. That only made me want the answer more, so I hardened my face and asked whether she was going to speak or not. The leader panicked at that, certain I was angry, and pressed her to talk. She was drowning in regret by then, over a curiosity strong enough to drag her here to see what her lord had done the night before. Curiosity really does kill cats. Seeing no way out, she steeled herself and explained the new use she had found for her talent and why she had come to my room. Then she dropped her head and stared hard at the floor. The leader's face changed as it landed on him. Investigating his lord's private business without permission was, in his eyes, a grave offense. He went down on his knees in front of me and begged me to spare her this once, since Cat Shadow was young and did not know better. My own first thought was that developing a whole new use of a talent overnight deserved praise rather than punishment. My second was pure embarrassment, because if she had read that plant's memory, then she had watched Windsor and me. Windsor arrived at the same conclusion beside me and went scarlet from her neck up. I looked at the kneeling leader, at Cat Shadow with panic all over her, at Mo Ryong standing close by her sister, and turned it over. I had nothing to hide from any of them. All the same, a girl who would do that once would do something far worse later, if nobody put a rein on her. The only question was what shape the punishment should take. Then an idea arrived, and I smiled somewhere behind my face. I told her flatly that she had made a mistake, that I intended to punish her for it, and asked whether she accepted. She knew she was in the wrong, so she kept her head down and said in a small voice that she accepted. The leader and Mo Ryong went tense at the word punishment and stared at me anxiously, though neither dared plead a second time. I sentenced her to a week at my side as a servant, attending to my daily needs. Keeping her close would build affection between us and give me 7 days to sand down her edges. Her face went awkward at the sentence, and her reluctance was written all over her, but she recognized a light punishment when she heard one and nodded her understanding. The other two were openly delighted and bowed to thank me for my leniency. Mo Ryong was glad her sister had escaped anything harsh, and that was the whole of it for her. The leader read the same sentence very differently. He decided I had kept Cat Shadow beside me deliberately, which would bring the two of us closer. A lord close to a daughter of the White Cat clan meant his tribe would be leaned on more, which was a fine outcome by his accounting. He was calmer than he had been the day before, because the sisters had told him about their meeting with me once they got back. From that he had judged I would not lay a hand on either of them. What he did not know was that I simply had no interest in forcing anything. I had no intention of letting either sister go. I called the matter settled, and ordered the move to Heya territory to begin, and the leader went out to see to it. The sisters fell in behind me instead. I glanced back at Mo Ryong and asked whether she did not trust me, whether she was afraid I meant her sister harm with nobody watching. Her expression froze, since that was exactly her worry and she had not expected me to name it out loud, and she stood there embarrassed with no answer ready. I saw how uneasy she was, shook my head gently and told her it was fine, that she could follow along if she wanted to. Of course I was not going to refuse her, since that was dinner walking to my table on its own legs. Love at first sight is rare in this world, and most of what people call love starts as plain attraction and only turns into the real thing after enough days have gone by. I walked out of the clan leader's pavilion and had Mo Ryong take me to the White Cat clan's warehouse, since the leader had mentioned a fair quantity of materials and food sitting inside it. I was not leaving a crumb of it. I had already decided that once every last White Cat had moved out, I would tear the camp's walls and houses down for the lumber. I stripped that place to the bone, and the cleanup took 2 hours from start to finish. The column set out for Heya territory after that, moving slowly because the group was large and the jungle kept throwing the occasional monster at our flanks. We did not reach the territory until noon. Back home, I put the White Cat clan leader together with Sokpan to arrange housing for every last one of them, then went to the Lord's Manor and ate lunch. Afterwards, Windsor, Dark Moon, and Huahua took a body of troops out to Heya Port for the day's hunting and fishing. That reminded me it was the last day of the week, and the survival points rewards would be handed out tomorrow. I opened the survival points leaderboard. I held first with 2,960. Baek Seol sat second on 2,320. Lee Kyo third on 2,110. And Ye Baek Peng fourth on 2,022. James took fifth with 1997. Kaidi sixth with 1991. Isabel 7th with 1822 and Elizabeth 8th with 1713. Cook held 9th on 1571 and Jin Moseong 10th on 2223. Nobody had moved position, though every score except mine had climbed a good distance. My own total sitting frozen told me something useful, that the ranking counted only the points earned by my ship and ignored everything my territory produced. Frozen or not, I was still 600 points clear of Baek Seol behind me. Tomorrow's first place reward was mine again. And since this closed out the month with me holding first the entire way, whatever came should be worth having. I went inside and checked on the Chaos Heavenly Exotic Beast Egg, which I had not looked at since feeding it a drop of Genesis Pearl the day before yesterday. Incubation progress, 15%. Incubation halted. The energy from that drop had run dry, and with nothing feeding it, the egg had simply stopped. 15% from one drop was strong work, which put the whole hatch at roughly 6 more drops. If 3 drops were still left over at the end, I could spend them on the merfolk. They had slid back into barely maintaining their vitality, since I had no way to build the mermaid growth pool anytime soon. A long stretch starved of energy could damage their foundation and leave them with congenital deficiencies, and a flawed mermaid hero is not what I want to raise. Even so, I was not spending Genesis Pearls on them yet. If the egg turned out to eat more than expected near the end, and I came up short because I had emptied my stock early, that would be genuinely painful. Nothing in this world is worse than a progress bar frozen at 99%. I left the house for the courtyard and pulled up the upgrade requirements on the Lord's Manor. Level 2 wanted 500 wood and 500 stone, so I paid it on the spot. The manor spread out considerably wider and picked up 4 more rooms in the process. I had Mori walk the Cat Shadow sisters through the building and settle them into rooms of their own, then went out with Tiger Mountain to raise a wall around my city. The Abyss Holy Wall construction blueprint was purple, and it built the Abyss Holy Wall, which at full upgrade could resist destruction by king-level creatures. It asked for 4,000 stone, and for once I had the stone to spend. The wall came up 500 meters by 500 meters, 1 meter thick and 2 meters high, grayish-blue along its whole length. It was a plain thing, and for some reason standing inside it gave me a sense of safety I had not felt on this island before. Then I emptied out my Arrow Tower blueprints, since the White Cat camp had left me a mountain of basic materials and I wanted the whole set raised at once. There were 3 White Arrow Tower blueprints, 2 green ones and 1 blue. The blue caught me off guard because I had ignored that pile so long that I had forgotten anything decent was in it. Towers are useless on open water, so I had shoved them into a corner of my storage. I also had an Ice Crystal Tower blueprint, green quality, and the tower fires a freezing ray that damages enemies and slows their advance, which the description promised would raise my territory's safety another level. It wanted 100 wood, 100 stone, and 5 ice element gems. The gems killed it, since I had gems of other elements and not one of ice, so the blueprint went back into the ring. The arrow towers themselves were straightforward. A white one holds a single archer and costs 50 wood and 5 stone. A blue one holds 3 for 120 wood and 20 stone. Each of them puts archers up high so their shooting carries, and the better the quality, the larger the structure, and the more people it takes. I set the blue tower in the middle of the northern wall and a white tower at the northwest and northeast corners. The north backs onto the northern mountains, and even with Hea Lake sitting between us, it remains the dangerous side. Green towers went to the southeast and southwest corners, and the last white went to the middle of the western wall. My city faces south from the north, with the main gate set in the southern wall and a small gate in each of the other three. The tower bases are reinforced stone with wood above them and a watch platform at the top for the men to stand on. With that done, I pulled up my territory information. Heiha territory, rated a third-class village. Buildings listed a level 2 Lord's Manor, a kitchen, residential buildings, wells, public washrooms, arrow towers, a lumber yard, and a quarry. Territory residents came to 371, subordinate heroes to 8, troop nests to 15, and military strength to 80. My assets stood at 53,804 whitestone, and the overall rating at 4,241. The upgrade conditions ran underneath it. Buildings wanted a level 2 Lord's Manor, a lumber yard, a quarry, and residential buildings. All achieved. Territory residents wanted 200. Achieved. Heroes wanted 1. Achieved. Everything on the list was green, which put me in an excellent mood. I had not expected to clear all of it this fast, least of all the resident count. Without stumbling onto the White Cat clan, I would have waited a very long time to reach 200 people. I gave the order to upgrade the territory. The response asked for 10,000 whitestone, confirmed my funds were sufficient, and wanted my confirmation. Of course it wanted whitestone. Chianmo does not let a single opportunity to relieve me of currency slip by unused. Fortunately, I had piled up a good deal of it over the past few days, mostly by killing demon beasts while drilling my soldiers and selling every carcass to Chianmo through the trading channel. A smaller share went to the lords still drifting on the sea, for whom demon beast meat is a rare delicacy, though not many of them can afford it. I confirmed it in silence. A ring of white light appeared over the territory, spread outward from the center, and vanished. When I checked again, my territory had become a second-class village. I had Tiger Mountain shift into her tiger form and rode her a full circuit of the territory to see what had changed. I found absolutely nothing, which made me wonder whether raising the level did anything at all. Possibly the benefits were there and I had not spotted them, or possibly my territory was still too low for them to show. Since I could not find an answer, I stopped chewing on it. I opened the trading channel, meaning to buy more iron ingots and copper ingots, since I had no way to produce either, and could only stockpile what I could get. 10,000 whitestone bought 7,000 iron ingots and 3,000 copper ingots, which brought me to nearly 10,000 iron and 4,000 copper, counting the last batch. I capped the spending there because the remainder was earmarked for summoning troops, and troop summoning carries a monthly limit, so summoning early is always the better play. Then I checked what I had left, and read 34,804. That was wrong. 10,000 out for the upgrade and 10,000 out for materials should have left me 33,804. So where had an extra 1,000 come from? A hint answered before I could finish the question, telling me that the title of First City Lord under Heaven carried a 10% discount on territory upgrades. I sat there and blinked at it. So the title was not purely decorative after all. I had taken it for a line of domineering text good for nothing but prestige, and instead it had quietly handed me back 1,000 white stone. Upgrades only ever get more expensive as a territory climbs, so doing the arithmetic forward, that discount was going to save me an absurd amount of currency over the long run. With that settled, I checked what the next territory upgrade wanted. Buildings called for a level 3 Lord's Manor, a lumberyard, a quarry, residential houses, a well and a medical room, and that line was not met. Citizens wanted 400, also not met. Heroes wanted 2, which was met. The new entries were the well and the medical room, along with the manor at level 3. None of that frightened me, since the wells were already standing and the medical room blueprint sat in my ring ready to place. Raising the manor to level 3 wanted 2,000 wood and 1,000 stone, which was a few days of steady gathering. The hero requirement asked for 2 people and I had 8. Windsor, Dark Moon, Shuawa Ha Rui, the Wood Elf Ha Changde, Tiger Mountain Seokpan, and the Mermaid Hero. 6 of the 8 were legendary. Ha Changde was epic, and only Seokpan sat at outstanding quality. In my hands, an outstanding quality hero counted as the weak link of the roster. That is exactly the kind of sentence that gets a man beaten to death by envious players if he says it aloud. On top of the 8 heroes, I had Little Blue, Dalgi, and the Chaos Heavenly Exotic Beast, 3 gold quality pets, counting myself, that made 10 gold and legendary tier existences standing under one roof, which was frankly abnormal. That was before counting the Cat Shadow Sisters who had just pledged themselves, epic quality commoners carrying real talents, and once those 2 grew into their abilities, they would be terrifying in their own right. Chengde also had a talent called Crystal Seeker, so tomorrow I would take her out and see whether it could sniff out a mineral vein for me. Then I looked at the citizen count and came back to Earth. 371 against 400, 29 people short. and I could see the population line becoming the permanent bottleneck on every upgrade from here forward. I had no clever answer for it either. Then I remembered the Myriad City Shop, an item I had picked up on the second day of the week after landing on the island and planting my territory. I had held it back on purpose, wanting the city walls up before I placed it, and the walls were up now. I went to the northwest quarter of Heiha City, the ground I had set aside for commerce. The whole city was already laid out in my head. An east-west main road would split Heiha City into a northern and a southern half, with the north taking 1/3 of the area and the south the remaining 2/3. The north divides into 3 zones running west to east, and the commercial district sits in the northwest, which will one day be the largest trading center in the city. Due north stands the Lord's Manor, and I plan to ring it with mansions for the territory's senior people. The northeast, on the far side of the manor, will hold the military district and the spiritual plant garden, which are the most critical ground in Heiha City, after the manor itself. The entire southern 2/3 goes to housing for ordinary citizens. It is a rough plan, and I will adjust it when reality argues with me. Surveying the commercial district took no time at all, since there was nothing standing on it. I took out the Myriad City Shop, gold quality, described as holding goods from most cities on the continent, including but not limited to the spirit domain, the demon domain, and the small worlds. I set it down on bare ground. Gold light flashed and the shop swelled rapidly until it became a palace-like structure covering about 100 square meters, which is not large as palaces go. It had a single floor, with upturned eaves at the 4 corners carrying statues of strange beasts and exotic creatures. Redwood below and a golden roof above made it look considerably grander than its footprint deserved. I pushed the door open and stepped inside with Tiger Mountain. The interior was simple, rows of display cabinets built from golden wooden shelves and purple glass counters, with a work counter set directly facing the entrance. 2 women stood behind that counter, which I had not expected at all. Both of them were human. The elder looked around 30, wearing a purple waist-cinching dress with her hair tied neatly up off a fair forehead, and every movement she made carried a certain charm. The younger was a girl of 18 or 19 in a long green dress with a ponytail down her back, lively and easy to like. Had the 2 of them been inside the item the entire time, or had they arrived only after I set it down? I carried the question to the counter, and the elder woman spoke before I could. She bowed slightly and introduced herself as the person in charge of this Myriad City Shop, gave her name as Jia Hyanggun, and told me I could call her Hyanggun or simply shopkeeper. Then she gestured to the girl beside her with one pale arm, and named her as her assistant, Ryu Air, who bowed and greeted me in turn. I nodded and went straight to the point, asking whether the 2 of them had been here all along. She had clearly expected the question and answered with a small smile, saying that they had arrived through a teleportation array once the Myriad City Shop was established. That brought me up short. If they had come by teleportation array, then the shop belonged to some organization, and that organization could step directly into my territory whenever it felt like it. I had just planted a live bomb in my own commercial district. She read the worry off my face without effort, since she had been trained at their headquarters and this was the most common reaction she met. She told me not to worry, because neither of them could leave the shop at all, and that this was an agreement between their lord and Qianmo. Only then did I relax. It also raised something far larger, because the shop had been built by a lord who could sit down and strike a bargain with Qianmo herself. How strong was a man like that? And how far did his reach run? The lord behind the Myriad City Shop had my full attention after that. A trial taker chosen by Qianmo, grinding through trial after trial until Qianmo would negotiate with him as an equal, needed a level of strength and influence I could not picture from where I stood. So I asked Jia Yonggun who her lord was. She smiled and said it was no secret at all, and told me that her lord was respectfully called the Flower Fairy by the people of the Lord Continent. My face stayed calm while everything behind it lurched. A fairy. As far as I knew, the top powerhouses on this continent reached the Emperor realm and stopped there, and I could not tell whether fairy was an honorific or an entire realm sitting above that. The first would be fine. The second would be genuinely frightening. Flower Fairy also sounded like a woman's name, and the thought that someone that powerful was a woman made me more curious still. I asked her where her lord's territory was, and whether it was also an island on the sea. The word island confused her for a moment before she caught up with it, and she murmured something under her breath about having come to the main world of the Lord Continent this time. The realization disappointed her. She had assumed a lord capable of obtaining the Myriad City Shop on his own would be somewhere far more impressive, and instead he was still sitting in the main world. I caught the muttering and it made no sense to me at all. Why should it not be an island? I cut across her thinking and asked whether the shopkeeper could not manage a simple question. She snapped back to the room, sorted herself out, and gave me an apologetic smile, saying she had been distracted. Then, rather than answering, she put a question of her own to me. saying that before she could reply, she needed to know my identity and where my territory was. That made me far more curious about the flower fairy's territory, not less. Was the location so sensitive that she had to check my background before she could name it? There was nothing on my side I could not say, so I answered straight. I told her I was one of the new lords from the current batch of the Heavenly Mandate trial. The island under my feet was called Heiha Island, because I had named it myself. Beyond that, I could not help her, since I knew almost nothing about lords, and had no idea where this island actually sat. Jia Hyanggun stared at me with her composure gone. Beside her, Ryu Air stole a look at me with even more surprise and curiosity in her face. I had not expected my identity to hit either of them that hard, so I asked with a laugh whether it surprised her so much. She knew she had lost her poise and did not blame herself for it, because nobody stays calm standing in front of a Heavenly Mandate Lord. Her own Lord was a Heavenly Mandate Lord who had climbed up from Trial Taker one step at a time. She had taken me for a Trial Taker out of the main world of the continent, and instead here was the real thing. Xianmo had recently opened the Heavenly Mandate trial again, with humans as the chosen race. And by her information, it had been running less than a month. In under a month, a man had already planted a territory and had been lucky enough to pull the Myriad City Shop out of his rewards. She admitted plainly that my identity as a Heavenly Mandate Lord shook her, especially since I came out of the current batch of trial takers. She said anyone in her place would have reacted the same. Her head still felt muddled by the sound of her. I told her there were a great many Heavenly Mandate Lords about, and it hardly seemed worth the shock. She explained that a trial taker only ever meets Heavenly Mandate Lords, so of course it looked ordinary from where I stood. She added that before our batch arrived, this world had not seen a Heavenly Mandate Lord appear in 200 years. The earliest Heavenly Mandate Lords alive right now dated back 200 years, all of them enormously powerful by this point, and most people would go a lifetime without meeting one. That landed with weight. Anyone who survived 200 years on this continent would be sitting at the very tip of the pyramid, and ordinary people would never come near that world. It explained why meeting me had rattled her the way it did, and it left me feeling faintly awkward about the whole thing. I told her not to be surprised, since from now on she would be meeting Heavenly Mandate Lords all the time. Billions of us came in with this batch, so we are not rare in the slightest. She said I was joking, and that she counted herself fortunate simply to have met me without expecting to meet others. 200 years had passed since the last trial, and her standing was not high enough for her to know what that one had looked like. There was a second reason under her answer that she saw no need to explain to me. I could tell she did not agree with a word I had said, and I did not press it, because her agreement was worth nothing to me either way. I told her I had already given her the information she asked for and put the question to her again, whether she could now tell me where the Flower Fairy's territory was. She shook her head and said she was truly sorry, but that with my current identity, she could not reveal the location of the Flower Fairy Lord's territory. That soured my mood. I had paid the price she named and been handed a refusal, and while I could see she genuinely was not permitted to say it, I was not willing to let it go. I asked what my identity had to do with anything, and when she started to speak and then stopped herself, I told her to speak freely. Jia Hyanggun could tell that the Lord at her counter would not let the question go, so she stopped refusing him. She had already given him the courtesy of a warning, and any embarrassment now was his own doing. She was not worried about him striking at her, since a Heavenly Mandate Lord 1 month into the trial was unlikely to stand above her. Even if his strength did exceed hers, the rules of Cheonmo shielded everyone inside the Mansong shop. The one thing that worried her was an angry customer walking out for good, because her performance figures were the only thing she could not afford to lose. I nodded and waited. She told me that most people did not know where the Flower Fairy's territory lay, since the matter brushed against secrets of this world. Until I reached a certain status, they could not tell me. Then she watched my face, braced for offense. What she meant was that my strength and my standing were both too thin to qualify, and I could not argue with a word of it. Measured against the Flower Fairy, I was not worth measuring, so I would wait until my name was heavy enough, then go look at this mysterious Flower Fairy myself. And I told her I would not press her further. My calm knocked her off balance. She had clearly expected temper, and getting none left her looking at me with something close to approval, her voice warmer when she thanked me for understanding. I told her we could stop chatting and introduce the Mansong shop instead, since there was no information to squeeze out of this vein. Her smile widened at once, the reflex of someone trained for years to face a customer. Then she explained that the goods on offer here differed according to the customer's level. That was a system I had not expected, so I asked what she meant. She told me customers were sorted into 7 levels by how much they had spent, and that the higher the level, the wider the range and the better the quality. High-level customers also took priority on rare goods. Beyond that, they could place requests, after which the Mansong shop would go out and find whatever they needed. She made a point of adding that the searching carried no fee, and that a customer paid only for the item. so I asked whether that meant I had no level at all and could buy almost nothing, and she confirmed it. The only way up was step by step. When I asked how the brackets were divided, she laid it out cleanly. 1 gold stone spent made you a level 1 customer. 10 gold stone made you level 2, and every level after that demanded 10 times the one below it. My mouth nearly twitched out of my control. Everything in this world ran on goldstone, and goldstone was exactly what I did not have. 10,000 white stone bought me level 1, and 100,000 bought me level 2, which put level 7 at 1 million goldstone. That was 10 billion white stone. The number was so far past reason that I asked how many level 7 customers the shop actually had. She smiled and told me there were 3,729 of them. I was genuinely shocked, and she read it off my face. She explained that it was nothing strange, since the continent held a great many lords, and the shop had stood for nearly 200 years. Spread across 2 centuries, 10 billion white stone came to 50 million a year, or 5,000 goldstone annually. Then I caught myself, because somewhere along the line my brain had short-circuited badly enough for 5,000 goldstone to sound modest. I asked what I could actually buy right now, hoping the answer would not humiliate me. She told Yoa to fetch the catalog, and Yoa came back quickly with a white cube, set it on the counter and slotted a spirit crystal into its side. A black light screen unfolded in the air in front of me, packed with dense text and small images. Ja Hyung-gun explained that anything written in green light was available to me, and anything glowing red was not. I looked it over without saying much. It was almost entirely raw material, wood and iron ingots and copper ingots and stone, with no tools and no finished goods at all. Worse, every price sat at twice what Cheonmo charged. Iron ingots that Wang Mok bought for me at 10 white stone cost 20 white stone here. While we were still drifting on the sea, we had been living on Cheonmo's discount, and once a territory went up, we were sinking into this world for real. The first step of that, apparently, was accepting the world's prices. Nothing on the list was anything I badly needed, but I still spent 10,000 white stone on cotton batting and silk fabric. Neither appeared in the personal shop, so Wang Mok could not source them, and the trading channel was the only route. Cotton batting mattered more than it looked, since my residents would need it once the weather turned. Beyond that, I wanted more silk pajamas for Windsor and the others. My blueprint for making them is permanent, so as long as I have silk, I can turn out pajamas and set the style besides. The old ones had lost their novelty, and this time I intended to design a few genuinely interesting pairs. Then I asked how payment worked, since I had never traded with anyone who was not a trial taker. She told me I needed a flower card first. It would carry my information and record my spending, and it could also settle money with other people, including Cheonmo. That stocked me cold, because trading with Cheonmo sounded frankly abnormal. She explained that the Lord Continent had an organization called the Sea of Commerce, and that every commercial territory of real weight belonged to it. Several other leading members carried instruments much like the flower card. Any alliance that can let a man pay Cheonmo with a card sits at the top of the continent. None of that was my business yet, so I told her to process the card. The flower card turned out to be palm-sized and entirely gray, with the Mansong shop crest on one face and green plant branches on the other. I had just opened my mouth to ask how white stone got into the thing when Cheonmo's prompt arrived on its own, reporting an authentication asset card and asking whether I wished to transfer assets. I answered silently that I did, and the panel asked me to name the amount. I told it 10,000 white stone, since the rest had to stay back for summoning troops. The card lit up, and a small light screen floated above it showing my personal information and my asset balance, with a blank transaction record underneath. Ja Hyung-gun took the card back, saying Yoa had gone to gather my goods, and asked how I planned to carry everything away. That was easy, since besides Cheonmo's spatial grid I had a storage ring. I told her not to worry, and asked whether I could see what a level 1 customer was allowed to buy. She handed the card back at once, the transaction already settled, and I noticed the gray had turned white. Evidently the card took a different color for each tier. I put it away and turned to the new list. This time there were things worth having. Building blueprints appeared, residential buildings and wells and the like. All white quality, and white quality still had real use to me. The residential building blueprints especially, since I held very few and would need a great many more. There was white equipment for sale as well. Leather armor and bows and arrows and similar gear, priced between 50 and 100 white stone apiece. Summoning a white troop cost me 10 white stones, so one set of armor equaled 5 soldiers. What disappointed me was that the list still held no common or summoning cards. I asked what level those required, and the shopkeeper told me a level 2 customer could buy them. I felt distinctly unwell, because level 2 meant burning another 90,000 white stone here, and there was no alternative channel to argue for. Then it struck me that tomorrow was the last day of the month, and Cheonmo City opened on the last day of the month. I could simply buy common or summoning cards there instead. Once I thought about the place, I found myself looking forward to it, wondering what a city named after Cheonmo looked like inside, and whether other races walked its streets. Her voice pulled me out of it when she said my goods were ready. Yoa stood holding a small rectangular box of silver white, and I asked whether my things were inside and whether it was a spatial item. It was not that I did not want to check for myself. From the moment I entered the Mansong shop, my spirit eye had been useless, and reading the two of them had returned a prompt saying the environment was special and no information could be obtained. She confirmed it was a spatial storage box and invited me to take the goods myself, so I walked over to Yeo-ah and moved everything into my spatial ring and my spatial grid. When she caught sight of the storage ring, her composure slipped. She could not work out how a lord 1 month into the trial owned a spatial ring on top of an asset like the Mansong shop, and I could feel her interest sharpening. The afternoon was for the northern mountains, so I told her I would stop taking her time and would come back whenever I needed something. She answered with a small smile that she always welcomed my arrival. I nodded and started for the door. Behind me, her expression shifted through several things before she finally asked whether I would answer a question for her. I stopped and turned back, puzzled. I did not agree straight away and told her to give me the question first. She asked which number I was among the heavenly mandate lords to establish a territory, and then watched me with a mix of dread and hope. Whatever the answer meant to her, it clearly mattered enough to bend the rest of her life around. I had braced for something difficult, and this was almost disappointing. I told her I was the first, and then I left the Mansong shop without lingering, because a great deal was waiting for me. Jia Hyanggun stared at the door long after he had gone through it. Yo-ah waited, got no reaction at all, and finally reached over and nudged her. Jia Hyanggun came back to herself and said it was nothing. Then Yo-ah asked, her whole small face falling, whether the two of them would ever get back to the flower fairy world. Jia Hyanggun opened her mouth and found she had no answer, because she did not know whether she would see it again in this lifetime. The Mansong shop stood on the flower fairy's backing, and the flower fairy's territory was the flower fairy world itself, an independent small world of her own. Only the very highest tier of lords enjoyed that privilege, and one could argue that such lords had taken hold of a portion of Qianmo's own authority. Her question to this lord had been a test of whether he was qualified to learn that small worlds existed at all. Besides the lords who owned them, only those ranked in the top 50 of the main world were allowed to know. He plainly did not clear that bar. Yo-ah's face fell further as she read that expression, since the thought of never going home hurt the girl badly. Jia Hyanggun looked at the child who had followed her all this way, and softened. She said there was a chance, quietly at first, then said with her jaw set that the two of them would absolutely stand in the flower fairy world again. Yeo-ah lit up and said she believed it, because she believed everything her big sister Hyunggun said. Still, a doubt sat behind her eyes, since she knew this lord walked a trial, and the elders had always said people in trials die. Jia Hyanggun poked her gently on that pale forehead and asked whether Yo-ah truly doubted her. The girl smiled shyly, wrapped both arms around her sleeve, and swung it while insisting she believed every word. Jia Hyanggun told her to go and tidy their room, since they would be staying a long while, and Yo-ah went off with her feet barely touching the floor. Watching that light figure go, the shopkeeper let her own face darken again. She had no idea whether she would ever return. A person still had to live on hope, though, even when the hope was a lie, she was telling herself. This one was not entirely a lie. The man was the first heavenly mandate lord of his batch to raise a territory. He also held both the Mansong shop and a storage space, which was not remotely what a newcomer should be carrying. On the whole Lord continent, few people held both at once, heavenly mandate lord or trial taker alike. What she did not know was that the Mansong shop had simply been a reward he received the first time he set foot on the island. So she went on feeding her own conviction, because the alternative was despair. The Mansong shop was a pillar industry of the flower fairy world, run directly under the flower fairy's hand. Plenty of people back home wanted the shopkeeper's post, and it carried real honor, but only for ordinary folk. For Jia Hyanggun, the title was worth nothing, and would only draw ridicule onto the Peng family. Her Peng family stood first among the families there, and both her parents were important heroes serving the flower fairy. A small shopkeeper was beneath notice in that house. She had taken the post anyway, and there was a reason. The flower fairy world had wanted a marriage alliance with the dragon god world, and since the flower fairy had no descendants, she chose from among her subordinates, settling on Jia Hyanggun. Becoming shopkeeper was the one escape available, because the shop answered directly to the flower fairy, who had declared in advance that nobody was permitted to interfere with its operation. That was the true reason she stood behind a counter on a strange island. The choice was not free of cost. The shop's rule held that a shopkeeper could only go home after meeting a performance target, and one who failed never went home at all. The terms were harsh, but anyone who met the target returned to focused cultivation and a swift rise. She had wanted to build something of her own and hold the reins of her own fate, and it was simply a very hard road to walk. Yeo-ah's voice floated up from the back, asking whether she meant to rest now that the room was tidy. Jia Hyanggun smiled at how fast that girl shook off every trouble, called back that she was coming, and prayed that the heavenly mandate lord named Ha Shen would bring her a few surprises. Back in the territory, I put Tiger Mountain and Subpan in charge of taking the troops out to level. Then I used the communication spirit stone to call Ha Changde home, since I wanted her with me for the northern mountains. While I waited, I opened the requirements for pushing the Abyss Holy Wall up a rank. The wall was only a purple quality building and could be upgraded 4 times in total. At level 1 it ran 500 meters to a side, 2 meters high and 1 meter thick, and the next rank wanted 24,000 stone. That number nearly knocked me over, since level 1 had cost 4,000, and this was 6 times that in a single step. I did not want to think about level 3, and I had no idea how many days my people would need to quarry that much. I had meant to summon troops that afternoon, but Xianno City opened tomorrow, and walking into a city with empty pockets is pointless, so the summoning waited. Changde came back not long after, still palm-sized. I asked whether it frightened her that only the 2 of us were going out, and she said crisply that Changde was not frightened. I set her on my shoulder and turned north. Passing the purple moon demon wolf nest, I stepped inside and found the azure mane wolves no longer carried any hostility toward me. At this rate, it would not be long before every one of them answered my orders. Once we crossed the pass into the northern mountains, I swept the ground around us. The trees stood noticeably taller and grew far thicker here, and with the spirit eye I even picked out a plant-type monster beast, the first I had met on the whole island. It was far too weak to be worth the minutes, so I left it and pushed on due north, since the point of the trip was mapping the northern region. I told Ha Changde to reach out with her talent now and then, because ore veins were the real reason I had brought her. With the Mando treasure pearl in hand, I could record any vein we found, and mine it later, once my strength and my manpower allowed. Ore veins come out of resource cards too, but there is no sense ignoring free ground under my own feet. She said she understood. The beasts we met early were easy work. The deeper I went, the higher their quality climbed and the harder they hit. Then I stopped short, because a square wooden house stood ahead of me, with vines climbing its walls and small flowers open across them. A house had no business existing this deep in a mountain forest, and no sane creature would choose to live out here, so my mind raced through every explanation I could invent. While I stood there, the door opened, and an old man in a green robe came out leaning on a staff. His hair was short and slightly curled and green, hanging to his shoulders. His face was lined, and his eyes were a deep emerald. I was still measuring him when his head turned and his gaze landed squarely on mine. My heart lurched at the thought that he had already found me, and I did not move, in case he was fishing. Then he called out toward my trees and asked why I would not step in for a drink, since I had come all this way. When I stayed put, he laughed lightly and told me to bring the elf on my shoulder along. There was no hiding after that, so I came out from behind the trunks. I addressed him as elder and told him I had wandered in by accident, meant no harm, and would leave immediately. I was not about to walk up and chat with him, since I had no idea what he was. An old man living out here was a strangeness I did not want to gamble on. He laughed loudly and said there was no need to run off. It had been a very long time since a human passed through, and he only wanted conversation to pass the hours. I told him I had urgent business, then turned and walked. A green light screen bloomed across my path and stopped me dead. I dropped into my demon dragon form on the spot, threw up demon dragon armor, lit demon blood boiling, pulled out the heavenly dragon spear, and drove it into the screen. Surprise crossed his face when he saw the demon dragon form, but he did not lift a finger, only watched me with a smile. My spear stroke put ripples across the barrier, and nothing else. I tried several more times and got nowhere, which told me plainly what my strength was worth in his eyes. So I took out a magic scroll and held it where he could see it. The scroll was Ice Seal 1,000 Miles, gold quality, and using it cast a spell of the same name for large-scale damage. I had picked it up in the merfolk territory, and gold quality meant it could genuinely hurt beings of level 24 and above. The catch was that it covered an enormous area and did not care which side anyone stood on. I would never use it unless I had nothing left, since there was a real chance the enemy walked out alive while I froze to death in my own spell. The moment he registered the scroll, his endless smile finally cracked. He told me quickly not to be rash, and insisted he meant no harm, and I could see him weighing what a nervous man might do with a gold scroll in his fist. He could tell the grade it would not do him serious damage, but it would clearly be a nuisance, and he had no appetite for a fight with me. When I still did not move, he dissolved the barrier and said the whole thing had been a joke. Then he explained that he had lived on this island so long he could no longer remember how long. Humans almost never came through, and after seeing me he wanted to hear about the world outside. There was nothing rehearsed in the way he said it, and that settled me a little. He was also visibly cautious about the scroll, which meant he was unlikely to try anything sudden. And if he had been here that long, then he knew this island, which meant there was information here worth having. I told him we could talk exactly like this as long as he made no sudden moves. He gave me a rueful smile, plainly not having expected a human this paranoid, then told me that if I doubted him I should ask the little elf beside me. I looked at Ha Chong-dae doubtfully, since I had no idea wood elves could read ill intent. She understood the look without being asked, stared at the old man, closed her eyes to feel for a moment, and opened them again confused. She told me he truly held no ill will toward us. When I asked whether she could sense that from anyone, she admitted a little sheepishly that she could only sense it from him. She was not as formidable as I seemed to think. The old man laughed and said she could only read his goodwill because he was rather special, and that he could clear up my other questions if we talked slowly. With Chong-dae's word behind him, I believed enough to walk over, though I kept the scroll in my hand, because deterrence is not something you set down. He watched me approach with my fist clamped around it, and his eyelid twitched. I could guess what he was thinking about a boy that afraid of dying, and about what a nervous grip does to a gold scroll. I walked up and immediately ran the spirit eye over him, and got nothing back, not so much as a name. That soured my mood. I had failed to read Maya Ryong yesterday, and now here was a second person I could not read, and I began wondering whether Heya Island had a curse aimed specifically at me. Maya Ryong had the moon jade ring to blame, while this old man had no such excuse unless his strength simply sat so far above mine that the skill slid off him. He smiled and told me not to bother, since I would find nothing. That startled me badly, because he was the first being I had met who could feel the spirit eye probing him. The truth was worse than anything I had imagined, and this was exactly the sort of hidden monster the old stories warn you about. He invited me to sit and talk properly, led me to the open ground beside the house, and produced a table, chairs, a plate of fruit, and a full tea set. He brewed 2 cups and passed one across. The tea was green and clear with the leaves turning slowly on the surface, and a faint fragrance came off it. I did not drink. I looked at him instead, gave him my own name, and asked how I should address him. He told me to call him Elder Mock, took a sip of his own tea with visible enjoyment, and gestured at my untouched cup. He knew exactly why I was not drinking, and I could see him deciding again that this boy was terrified of death. If I could have heard the thought, I would have asked whether he was any less afraid, since he was the one flinching at a scroll. I told Elder Moak politely that I was not thirsty, and asked whether it was true he had been here a very long time. He nodded, said it had indeed been long, and added that he rarely left this island. The reason he had detained me was to learn what was happening outside. Rarely left meant he had left before, so the man was a genuine recluse rather than a prisoner. Then he said he was a native of this island and deeply attached to it, and would not leave except for something extraordinary. That word landed like a thunderclap, because natives meant there had been people here before me. Before I could work through it, he added that native was not quite accurate, since he had not been human before. I sat there staring at him like an idiot. That one sentence carried far too much, and the obvious reading was that he had not been human before but was human now. Then his chosen name caught up with me, and I had a guess. I started to ask whether he might be, and could not finish the sentence. He finished it for me and confirmed that he was a demonic plant that had taken human form. Everything settled into place after that. He called himself a native because he had grown out of the island, and that also explained how Cheong-dae could read his goodwill. She was a wood elf, close to plants by nature, so she could feel what a plant was feeling. It was not a talent at all, but an instinct. With that, I finally believed him properly and picked up the cup and drank. The tea was fragrant on the tongue and left a line of warmth all the way down. His smile widened, since he understood exactly what the drink meant, though his eyes flicked to the scroll still in my left hand, and the pleasure went out of him again. Then he looked at Ha Chong-dae with real confusion and asked where I had gotten this wood elf, adding that she seemed to carry a deficiency she was born with. That was the third shock the man had handed me in one afternoon. Chong-dae had an inborn flaw and I had never noticed. I knew he was not lying because there was nothing in it for him. I told him she had come to me by chance, which was no answer at all, but I had no idea how to give him a real one. I could hardly explain that Chong-dae had been a spirit crystal until my 100 transformations talent turned her into a person. Nobody would believe a word of it, and he would think I was mocking him. So I asked instead whether there was any way to remedy the flaw. Privately, I already had a guess at the cause, since a life built out of a spirit crystal by a talent is exactly the sort of thing that comes out incomplete. Pulling a purple epic hero out of a spirit crystal had felt like enormous luck at the time, and my strength was nowhere near enough to see what was missing anyway. He repeated her name and said it was a good one. I felt awkward taking the compliment because I am terrible at naming things, and Ha Chong-dae is the only name I have ever produced that sounds halfway respectable. Then he told me, smiling, that he did have a way to fix what she lacked. I asked immediately what price I would pay for him to act. I did not simply ask him for help, since we were nothing to each other and had met an hour ago, and treating it as a transaction was the honest approach. He glanced at me with amusement and told me there was no price, and that I only had to come and talk with him now and then. I did not believe it and said so, because that is not a price at all. He answered that it was not as small as I thought, and asked whether I intended to stay on this deserted island forever. I told him I did. That turned the surprise around, and he asked whether I had not simply stopped by the island in passing. We looked at each other across the little table. I told him plainly that I had come here to establish a territory and would be staying from now on. He came out of his chair on the word territory, and I could not understand why that of all things would jolt a creature like him. I asked him straight out why the news shook him. He did not answer, and asked instead whether I was a heavenly mandate lord or a trial taker. There was nothing worth hiding, so I told him honestly. He looked genuinely surprised and asked whether heavenly mandate lords were all as weak as I was, having clearly assumed I was a trial taker. My face went stiff. Compared to him, I was weaker by a margin no honest arithmetic could cover, but there was no need to put it in words like that. I told him that weak or not, I was a heavenly mandate lord, and that I had only held the title a month. I let the insult pass, mostly because I could not do anything about it. He thought a moment and asked whether the heavenly mandate trial had started again, and whether it was the human race this time, and I confirmed that it had just begun. Then I pushed my own question back at him. He glanced at me and told me not to be so nosy. I had nothing to say to that. I answered his question and he refused mine, and if I could have beaten him, I would not have been asking questions at all. He read the whole thought off my face and told me he would not make me answer for free, and that he would solve the little friend's inborn deficiency himself. That flipped my mood instantly. I had assumed the best case was him naming the method and leaving me to carry it out. Having him handle it personally was a windfall that saved me effort I could not even estimate. I told him quickly that it was a deal, before he could think better of it, and laughed and said he could ask whatever he liked. He shook his head, pointed a finger at me, and said I would not lift a hand until I saw the benefit in it. I just smiled and let it stand, because there is no sense doing work that costs effort and returns nothing. I am nobody's free labor. His first question was how many of this batch of heavenly mandate lords had established a territory. He did not seem to mind my bargaining, and I got the impression he approved of it, on the theory that among lords only that sort lives long. I told him that currently the answer was only me. He looked at me with fresh surprise and said it seemed the little friend was not so simple after all. I said modestly that he flattered me, and that I had only been lucky, though I doubt my eyes sold the modesty. He teased me for getting carried away on one compliment, then knocked me flat again. He said that being first only meant I had been lucky enough to find an island first, and that it proved nothing about whether I would still be standing at the end. My smile froze on my face. The old man had a real gift for saying the annoying thing. I had been lucky, but my luck was never about stumbling onto an island. My luck was drawing 100 transformations at the very start, and that one really could carry me all the way. He saw that I was not taking the warning seriously and pressed it. He told me not to get complacent, because the man who established the first territory in the last heavenly mandate trial lasted 2 months before he died. That stopped me. It meant there were still disasters waiting beyond the founding of a territory, and my mind went straight to the merfolk territory I had found out in the sea. I asked whether the disasters after founding a territory were stronger than what came before. He shook his head and said he could not tell me the specifics of the heavenly mandate trial, since he too stood under Chianmo's supervision. I was disappointed, but I did not push him again. Then he smiled and asked whether the two of us should make an agreement. Looking at his face, I knew he had been steering toward this the whole time. The old fellow looked exactly as cunning as he was, but there was no harm in hearing it. He laid it out simply. If I ran into trouble in the future, he would help me one time, and in exchange I would agree to one condition of his. That was worth taking seriously. I did not know his real strength, but my rough estimate put him at level 24 or higher. A being like that owing me a single move would be a trump card I could not otherwise buy. I did not accept immediately, because I still had to hear the condition. He told me he could not name it now, and that even if he did, I would not be capable of carrying it out yet. He could say clearly, though, that it would not damage my interests in any way. I thought for a moment and agreed. The agreement cost me nothing today, since the condition only came due after he had already saved me. If I ever needed a being of his level to step in, I would be standing in a crisis severe enough to make a condition the least of my problems. Staying alive comes first, and only the living get to argue terms. Beyond that, he had no reason to lie to someone like me. He nodded, pleased, and produced a single green willow leaf. He told me to take it, and that when I needed him, I should eat the leaf and he would come at once. I checked it and found it was called an Azure Wood Emperor's willow leaf, a special item, a willow leaf originating from the Azure Wood Emperor and usable to transmit information. I stared at him. I had suspected something like this since the barrier, but having it confirmed that Elder Mock was an Emperor-level demonic plant still rattled my bones. This was a genuine old monster sitting across a tea table from me. I could not help asking whether his true body was a greenwood willow, and he nodded without any attempt to dodge, since the leaf had already given the game away. Then I asked whether he was currently wearing a transformed body. That surprised him, and he asked where I had learned about transformed bodies, so I gave him a short account of my meeting with the Jimson mountain turtle. He laughed and said I had been quite lucky to run into that little mountain turtle. My eyelid twitched on its own. A level 22 Jimson mountain turtle, called Little, which is what such a creature looks like when you are big shot enough to say it with a straight face. He told me he was not in a transformed body and that this was his true form. That did not shock me much. The Jimson mountain turtle had already taught me that some demon plants and beasts take human shape while others keep their born form, and Elder Mock had evidently taken the first road. After that we talked about other things, what this world actually was, how the powers were distributed across it, the state of Hay Island, whether other races lived on it. Some questions he could not answer and some he was not allowed to, but I walked away with a great deal I had not had that morning. At last he said it was getting late, and started seeing us out. I stayed where I was, smiled, and pointed at Cheongdae on my shoulder. He blinked, caught up, and admitted he had been so absorbed in the conversation that he had forgotten the whole reason we were talking. Then he took out a round bead giving off a green light and handed it over, saying I only had to let the little one eat it. I thanked him and meant it, because I had gained far more here than I had any right to. He waved it off and said that if I really wanted to thank him I should come and talk with him more often, and I promised I would visit again when I could. I turned and started back toward my territory. Behind me, he watched me go with a smile that had a great deal more in it than warmth. The sky had gone dark by the time I reached the territory. I went up to my room in the Lord's Manor and found Windsor and Dark Moon waiting, with Wawa and the others still out guarding the ship. Windsor got up from the sofa the moment she saw me, still calling me a shin, and Dark Moon rose with her. I pressed them both back down by the shoulders, sat between them with an arm around each waist, and asked whether the day's hunting had gone smoothly. Windsor gave me a brief account, and I told them both about Elder Mock. They went pale by the end. Neither had expected me to walk into an emperor-level existence in a forest, and both were plainly relieved that this particular emperor had no interest in eating me. Once the two of them were calm, I took out the green bead. The panel called it a life orb, gold quality, taken from a fallen life-ancient tree, and said it held powerful vitality and that consuming it would strengthen vitality and shore up the foundation. The old man had handed me a gold-quality item as casually as a piece of fruit. What surprised me more was where it came from, because a life-ancient tree was no abstraction to me. I already had one growing in my own territory. I held the orb out to Ha Cheongdae and told her to eat it. She did not take it, and said she did not have to eat it directly since she had a better way. When I asked what her idea was, she asked me to carry her to the spiritual plant garden. I had no idea what she was planning, but I got up and took her, and Windsor and Dark Moon followed. In the courtyard, we ran into the Maya Ryong sisters in Tiger Mountain, all three of whom wanted to come and watch, and I saw no reason to refuse. The whole group walked out together. She asked me to bring her to the life-ancient tree, her voice as clear and bright as ever, and I set her down in front of it. She stepped off my hand, laid her small palm flat against the trunk, and asked me where the life orb was. When I produced it, she put one fair little finger into her mouth, bit it, and let a single drop of blood fall onto the orb. The blood sank straight in and vanished. I did not understand any of it and kept my mouth shut. Then she told me to press the life orb against the life-ancient tree. I did as she asked. The crown of the tree began to sway. The leaves stirred against each other, and the whole enormous trunk gave off a soft green light that put color into the darkening sky. With all of us watching, the life orb melted slowly into the body of the tree. As it went in, the tree began to grow, and Cheongdae, standing right against it, began to grow taller with it. I stepped back several paces and simply watched. It took a full half hour before the tree stopped, and by then it stood 7 meters tall, its crown shedding tiny emerald motes of light that drifted out in every direction. Some settled on the guardian soldiers, some fell across the mist trees, and some were drawn straight into the chaotic tree soldiers. Out beyond the walls, where I could not see it, the grain I had ordered planted drank the same green light and shot upward. I noticed none of that because my eyes were fixed on Ha Cheongdae. She had changed beyond recognition. The palm-sized sprite was gone, and in her place stood a girl a full meter tall in a green dress, with long green hair curling at the ends, and a fair, soft face. Her eyes opened slowly, emerald pupils glowing faintly for a moment before the light faded out. Then she came running at me on her short legs and called me Lord, and I laughed, scooped her up, and read her again. She was a wood elf of legendary grade now, standing at level 6, with strength, agility, defense, and intelligence all sitting at 44 and mana at 440. Her profession read as hero and elf emissary. Her skills had grown to 10 bead volley, vine arrow, flower burst arrow, life healing, and life drain, with the purple demon Shadowbow still in her hands, and crystal seeking as her talent. A shift that large out of one bead was more than I had bargained for. Then I looked back at the life-ancient tree, which had swallowed the orb whole, and figured it must have taken something worth having too. It had. The life-ancient tree now read as gold quality at level 6, with strength 50, agility 45, and defense 52, carrying the skill Light of Healing and a talent called Life Ancient Realm. I stood there mildly stunned, because the tree had jumped from level 2 to level 6 in one swallow, while its size had barely moved. What really caught me was the new talent. Life Ancient Realm sounded like a space-type ability from the name alone, and it was a genuine shame that I could not pull up the details of the effect. Ha Changde piped up that she knew what the tree's new talent was, as if she had read the thought out of my head. I asked how she could possibly know, and everyone else turned to look at her too. She explained that she was connected to the Life Ancient tree now, and that she had in a sense been nurtured by it, so of course she could read its information. I thought back to the drop of blood she had put on the life orb, which had to be the reason. Then she announced, with her small chin lifted, that she was going to be the Spirit Empress one day. The blank looks she got from all of us seemed to delight her. She explained it properly after that. When the Life Ancient tree grew to its full limit, it would be able to nurture spirits, and the first spirit it nurtured would become the Spirit Empress. The life orb had bonded her to the tree, which made her that first spirit, so once it brought the spirit race into being, she would stand as their empress. Her whole face was full of pride while she said it, and the rest of us just stared. None of us could stretch our imagination far enough to see this 1-meter girl ruling a race. I asked her what the Life Ancient Realm actually was. She told me the tree had only awakened the talent because of the life orb, and that without it the tree would have waited until at least level 24. She described the Life Ancient Realm as a space of life, one where only the spirit race could survive and outsiders could not enter at all. She added that this was how it stood for now, that things might change as its level rose, and that she was not clear on the details yet. When I said that made the realm a prelude to nurturing the spirit race, she agreed happily and told me her lord was very clever. She takes every opening she gets to flatter me. I asked what use the realm had and whether Hwawa and the others could go inside. She said that within it the spirit race would heal faster and could slowly raise both their strength and their aptitude, though that process took decades or even centuries. As for Hwawa and the rest, she thought they could not enter, since they were elemental spirits and different in kind from her. I came away a little let down, because a name that grand deserved a better payoff than a healing garden nobody I owned could use. What I did not understand then was how rare anything that raises aptitude is on the Lord continent, where even a crippled version of that is priceless. The truth was that I had too many high-grade heroes around me, and it had made me contemptuous of anything slow. I told everyone the business was done and we went back to the Lord's Manor. After dinner, I took Dark Moon and Windsor up to our rooms. While the two of them were bathing, I started my daily round of 100 transformations. Though first I wanted to look through what the day's resource fishing had pulled up. The first item was a silver-white gem with a distinctly technological look. The panel called it a space gem, green quality, and said that using it would expand a space including but not limited to storage rings, space chests, and similar tools. My eyes lit up at that. My storage ring only held 30 cubic meters, which had started feeling cramped, and while Hwawa had a ring with more room in it than mine, hers was hers. I was not about to appropriate it. I could always ask her to carry something, and given how many hundreds of millions of my funds that little spirit burns through in a day, nobody could call it unfair. The gem solved the problem outright. After I used it, my ring came out at 130 cubic meters, a clean gain of 100. A green quality space gem apparently could not do more, and for me it was already plenty. The second item turned out to be a troop nest, a rapid shooter troop nest of green quality, capable of summoning green quality rapid shooter troops. A green nest for a ranged unit was not bad at all, since I had no troops of that type in my roster, though the quality was nothing to celebrate. I thought for a moment, specified the type, and ran 100 transformations on it anyway. I had no suitable blue quality items on hand, so green was all I had to work with. It had been so long since I fed my talent a green item that I felt a small flicker of excitement. A blue light flashed. I had expected as much, and was still faintly disappointed that no critical hit came with it. What lay in my hand was still a troop nest, now reading as a flame shooter troop nest of blue quality, capable of summoning blue quality flame shooter troops. I smiled anyway. Blue was not gold, but this particular blue suited me and filled a hole in my army, since a flame shooter is an elemental unit and stands far above a green quality rapid shooter. I put it away and decided to summon a batch once I got back from Cheonmo City tomorrow. The last thing the fishing had turned up was a grayish-white bone flute. Looking at it dragged up the jade bead snow wolf brush, because that blue quality oddity had turned into a purple building blueprint under 100 transformations, the spirit painting pavilion construction blueprint. The only pity was that I still lacked the materials to raise the building, and the function of that pavilion is frankly abnormal. I checked the flute. It was called a magic soundbone flute, blue quality, and equipping it raised the wearer's strength attribute by 20%, with no equipment requirements at all. The blank requirement line surprised me, since I had assumed a class restriction like the one on the jade bead snow wolf brush. Useful as the bonus sounded, the flute did nothing for me personally, and nobody around me was suited to squeeze real value out of it, so it went into the talent too. This time I did not specify a type and ran a random 100 transformations. A flash of purple light passed, and I was left holding a fragment of bone with strange patterns cut across its surface, which told me nothing until I read it. It called itself the Soundkill King's Tomb Route Map, purple quality. The Soundkill King had been a renowned existence on the Lord Continent during the 7th Heavenly Mandate era, and the location of his tomb had remained unknown after his death. That left me with a pile of questions. Was there some link between this and the magic sound bone flute, given that both were bone? Or had the flute once hung at the Soundkill King's own belt? A king-rank existence is nothing to sneer at, and a 7th Heavenly Mandate era had to mean the 7th Heavenly Mandate trial, which made me wonder for the first time exactly which trial I was standing in. Turning the fragment over in my fingers, I concluded it was useless to me. I could not even explain the circumstances of my own arrival on the Lord Continent, so hunting a lost king's tomb was somewhere past absurd. Then my eyes lit up and I pulled out something else. A silver pass, a special item, a silver-grade auction pass to the Yeonjong Trading Company of Cheonmo City. I was going to Cheonmo City tomorrow, and I could carry the bone fragment straight to the Yeonjong Trading Company and put it under the hammer. I could not use it, and somebody in that city absolutely would want it. That was a pile of funds waiting to become troops. I pulled out the next item, a green-quality construction blueprint for a water tower. Building one would raise the living standard of the territory's residents, and with it, their support for me as their lord, and it wanted 300 stone, 30 iron ingots, and 3 water element gems. This one had come off the great tree during the treasure hunt event, along with far too many others, and since most of those were green or white, I had barely touched the pile. I could have built the tower easily since I still had element gems, but a plain well already covered what my people needed. So I ran a random 100 transformations again, rather than specifying anything. A milky white light passed, and my eyebrows went up, because milky white means a special item. A sphere sat in my palm, and the panel named it a Territory Water Technology Sphere, a special item which on use would light up Territory Water Technology. I could not keep the delight off my face. A technology sphere is rare enough, and this one was for territory technology, which matters considerably more than ship technology. I had gone digging through territory technology after the information panel updated. Unlike ship technology, it cannot be lit with currency under any circumstances, and demands a technology sphere instead. That alone makes it the more precious of the two, because there are days when money cannot buy you a sphere at all. I used it without hesitating. Opening the territory technology option inside the technology panel, I found territory water technology sitting there with a build option under it, and I pressed build. The panel answered that level 1 territory water technology could handle the water needs of 100 people in the territory, that construction cost 50 purple stone, and asked whether I wanted to proceed. 50 purple stone is 5,000 white stone. I looked at that prompt and pressed no, since I needed white stone in my pocket for Cheonmo City tomorrow, and a day or two would change nothing. If level 1 already wanted 50 purple stone, this was going to be another hole in the ground that I poured money into for years. By my count, I now had 3 of those: ship technology, troop recruitment, and territory technology. The cruel part is that not one of the 3 can be skipped. Running a territory is simply too expensive, and what I needed, above every blueprint and every talent, was money. Windsor came out of the bathroom in a light gold silk nightgown and asked why I was pulling such a long face. Since the Lord's Manor upgraded, every room has its own bathroom with proper bathing facilities, and she had clearly made full use of hers, coming out flushed and warm with her hair still damp. I told her I needed comforting and pulled her into my arms, and she went redder still, patted my shoulder, and told me to bathe first. I agreed enthusiastically and headed for the bathroom, and she started to call me back, having just remembered Dark Moon was already in there. The laughter that came out answered her, and Windsor covered her face with both hands. Windsor picked up a book and went back to the bedroom, knowing perfectly well that my bath would run long. An hour later, Dark Moon came in wearing a black silk nightgown, and Windsor smiled at her over the top of the page. Dark Moon accused her of laughing, with none of her usual cold poise left and her black cat ears twitching. Windsor put the smile away and told her to come over, since she had been through the same evening herself and had no standing to tease. I walked in drying my hair to find the 2 of them waiting, gold silk and black silk, and concluded that the bath had probably been wasted effort. Whether I could handle both of them was a question the night answered on its own. Morning came, and the sight of the 2 of them still asleep in the light nearly kept me in bed permanently. I have enough practice at this to have built some resistance, so I got up quietly and went out to the living room. Every room in the Lord's Manor has a living room now, and calling them rooms has stopped being accurate. Cat Shadow was sitting on the sofa. I asked what she was doing here, and she jumped up, took one look at me standing there, nothing but shorts, and dropped her eyes to the floor. She reminded me, sounding annoyed about it, that I had been the one to make her my personal maid, and that she was here to serve me and help me wash and dress. So I asked her why, in that case, she had not been personal with me last night. Her face went scarlet, and she stammered without producing a single coherent word. Seeing that, I stopped teasing, stepped over and pinched her soft cheek, then rubbed one of her white cat ears out of curiosity. She shivered hard, since the ears turned out to be extremely sensitive, and I noted with interest that this little cat girl's ears beat even dark moons. I told her to go into the bedroom and attend to Windsor and Dark Moon, and left the room. A table had been set up in the yard, where Mori and Mio Ryong were laying out breakfast. I sat down and started eating immediately, and Windsor and the others drifted out one by one, so the meal turned into the usual noise and laughter. Partway through, I opened the chat channel, which I had not checked in quite a while. The whole board was people marveling that they had survived a month, hoping a milestone came with special rewards, and admitting the disasters had started feeling almost routine. One man was pleased with his level 6 wooden boat, until somebody told him he had no ambition. The big shot had already founded a territory, and nobody seriously believed his life had gotten worse for it. From there it slid into speculation about how large Chiamo City could possibly be, and whether maps would go on sale so more of them could found territories, and then into pure nonsense. I said nothing and let it run, because expecting that crowd to stay serious has never once worked. Chiamo's announcement dropped while I was still reading. The first congratulated everyone on surviving a month and having initially adapted to this world, and urged us to keep at it and raise territories so that we became true lords. The second announced that the survival rewards had been distributed and told us to collect them promptly. The third said Chanmo City would open in 1 hour, that the top 100,000 by survival points could enter the city itself, and that everyone else would arrive in the Chanmo Islands instead. A note added that the rules of Chanmo City had been pushed to every lord through the chat channel and should be read carefully. 100,000 into the city. Then, though the honest figure was 200,000, once you counted the demon domain side of the ledger. I opened my survival point rewards straight away. It was 2 picks out of 5 as usual, except that this time every one of the 5 was gold quality. Looking at them dragged up the special offers my personal shop used to run, which I had genuinely mourned losing. I had gone so far as to try buying through other people, only to find nobody else had special offers this week either. Evidently those offers only ran for 4 weeks and are gone for good. I put the thought aside and worked through the 5 carefully. The first was an old acquaintance, the disaster immunity card, gold quality, which after use meant no disasters would strike the territory for a full month. It had appeared once before, when I founded the territory, and I had passed it over then in favor of the Mansong shop and the blood fusion agent. If nothing else on the list beat it, I was taking it this time without hesitation. The second was a blueprint, and reading it made my eyes light up. It was for a psionic shipyard, gold quality, an automated yard that needed only a small crew, sufficient materials, and psionic energy to turn out warships quickly. The requirements ran to 3 psionic cores, 2,000 energy storage stone, 100 adamantine, 500 gold element gems, 300 fire element gems, and 100 water element gems. I had never so much as heard of 3 of those. Troublesome as it was, I put it at the top of my list. On a continent that is mostly ocean, the value of warships speaks for itself, and a gold shipyard would be wings strapped to a tiger. Materials I can eventually buy out of the Mansong shop, but a blueprint I let slip might not cross my path again for years. The third was a black card, the first of its kind I had seen. The panel called it a psionic card, gold quality, used to store psionic energy and power psionic equipment, containing 100,000 units of psionic energy. It was obviously the matching piece for the psionic shipyard, and it left me genuinely stuck because I had no concept of how much work 1 unit of psionic energy actually does. The fourth was another returning face, the Nine-Tailed Demon Emperor's Heartblood Essence, gold quality, which grants the bloodline of the Nine-Tailed Demon Emperor on consumption. For members of the Fox clan, it raises bloodline purity and cultivation both. That one had Dalgi's name written across it in large letters, and she would come out of it transformed. The last item was a book that looked genuinely ancient, and since no book had ever turned up as a reward before, it had my curiosity for a moment. It was called the Demon Emperor Art, gold quality, a cultivation technique, and practicing it granted 100 experience points a day. A note said it could only be used once and that the learner had to be a general rank member of the Demon Clan. I sat there mildly stunned. Cultivation techniques existed in this world, apparently despite everything about it insisting that you level by killing demon beasts. Worse, the payout was pitiful, since 100 experience a day is slower than simply going out and hunting. I complained about it inwardly for a moment, then made myself stop and think. A gold quality item does not appear out of nowhere, so there had to be a value here that matched the grade, and most likely my own knowledge was too shallow to see it. Either way, it was useless to me, and it came saddled with restrictions besides. The Demon Emperor Art went out of the running first, since it was worthless to me at the moment. Dalgi and Little Blue both needed time before either touched the general rank, and the cultivation method could be used only once. The spirit energy card went next, since I had no real sense of what 100,000 units of spirit energy amounted to. Spirit energy is precious and not precious at once, being mineable out of spirit crystals. That left 3, and I struck the disaster exemption card for the same reason as last time. Hardship keeps a man alive and comfort kills him, and a crisis is only an opportunity wearing an ugly face. I trusted my own strength to carry me through whatever disaster came, and if it could not, nobody else in this trial was surviving either. What I did not know yet was that the disaster following a territory's founding is matched to that territory's own strength. So I took the Spirit Energy Shipyard and the Nine-Tailed Demon Emperor's Heart Blood Essence, then brought Windsor and the Blood Essence through the teleportation array to the tower ship. Dalgie was waiting where she always waited, and I pulled out the Blood Essence and shook it at her. Her eyes lit and her whole fox body came alive. She snatched the Nine-Tailed Demon Emperor's Heart Blood Essence out of my hand and drank it down without a word. My stomach dropped because I remembered swallowing dragon blood myself and how close that came to killing me. I stood there hoping nothing was about to go wrong, and nothing did. She simply lay down on the deck, folded her enormous fluffy tail over her head, and went still, as though asleep. I stared at her, puzzled, and then worked it out. She had been born of the Nine-Tailed Fox clan, so the blood essence forced nothing foreign into her, and only refined what she already carried. My case had been the opposite, a human building a dragon bloodline inside a body that never asked for one, which is why the pain nearly finished me. Understanding it, I let out a long breath, because she was fine and that was enough. I told Windsor the day's task was hunting, and that she was to arrange all of it, then handed her the resource fishing rod, and told her to use up the day's fishing attempts too. She promised she had it handled, and called me Shin the way she always did. Huawa caught my arm and shook it, and asked whether she could not go too. I shook my head and explained that the rules for Channo City this time let lords in and nobody else. She sagged, then bounced back and told me to be careful. Then I left the tower ship with Tiger Mountain and went home, because somebody with real weight had to guard the territory while I was gone. I had barely arrived when the messages started. Lee Kyo and Bake Seol and the rest wanted to know whether we should move as a group inside Cheonmo City. I told them it would come down to luck, since we would be scattered across random drop points and hunting each other would burn hours we did not have. They let it drop. Not long after, a square green teleportation gate opened in the air in front of me, and Shanmo's voice came with it, telling every lord to step through without delay. I did not hesitate. Cheonmo City, here I came. Out on the open sea, on ship after ship, the newborn lords of this era stepped into their own gates with the same excitement in their faces. For them this was a wonder and a holiday both. The Cheonmo Islands were thousands of islands strewn across an azure sea like stars, some tens of thousands of square kilometers across and some barely tens. On every one of them a stretch of ground had been set aside for today, the Destiny Zone, which received the heavenly mandate lords of this era. As those lords appeared, important men outside the Destiny Zones waited for their runners to bring back anything worth hearing. They knew the ones landing on the outer islands were not the standouts of this trial, but a pearl does sometimes turn up in the dust, and a cheap net costs nothing to throw. The true standouts were beyond men of that level, and knowing it, more than a few tilted their heads back and looked at the sky. Cheonmo City hung up there above the islands, a giant built of green stone veined with golden mark. It was square, 100 kilometers to a side, tens of thousands of square kilometers of city floating in open air. Armored soldiers stood every 10 steps along its walls, and a magic energy turret squatted every 100. Overhead, flying demon beasts carried riders of every race on patrol, with a presence that made the whole sky feel owned. The Destiny Zone sat in the northwest corner of that vastness, and I came out in its southeastern corner. Before I could turn my head, a woman in an ice blue dress was already walking toward me. She was about 5'7", with blue hair pinned up in a bun and a face that would stop traffic anywhere on Blue Star. Every line of her said cold. I knew what she was, because Cheonmo had told me each of us got an exclusive guide for Cheonmo City. She stopped in front of me and asked, flat as a ruler, whether I was Ha-Shin. There was not a flicker of feeling anywhere in the words. I wondered whether somebody had built her in a workshop, and if this was the personality that qualified a guide. I had questions about Cheonmo's training program. I kept that behind my teeth, smiled and told her she had the right man. Admitting my name cost nothing, since Cheonmo had made clear these guides knew only who they were assigned to lead. A name, and not one thing more. Then she asked whether I sold territory cores. She specified that she meant my own core and not the ones I had taken off other people. I had no answer ready for that. I was fairly sure the questions were supposed to run the other direction, and instead here she was, bidding on the one thing a lord never parts with. I began to suspect my day in Cheonmo City was not going to run smooth. I pushed the discomfort down and told her plainly that my territory core was not for sale. If I had not needed her to walk me through the destiny zone, I would have wanted her gone. She said only that she understood, then asked which points I wanted to exchange first. Her letting it drop that easily surprised me, though looking at her, she was not built for nagging. I told her survival points first, then asked how I ought to address her, since calling her Miss Forever was going to get tiring. She said I could call her Lee Chong-han, then set off in front, and I followed without argument. Walking behind her, I asked which forces own the shops in the Destiny Zone. Without turning her head, she said most belonged to lords ranked inside the top 10,000 on the spirit ranking of the Lord continent. When I asked what the spirit ranking was, she said it ranked spirit domain lords and recorded only the strongest 100,000. I filed it away as a thing with nothing to do with me yet, since my territory was still an infant. What I missed entirely was the flicker of longing that crossed her eyes when she said the name. Then I asked where a man could buy a map of the Lord continent, because being blind to the shape of my own world had started to grate. She looked at me with an expression I could not read, and suggested I buy a map of my current area instead. When I asked why, she said it was because I could not afford a complete map of the Lord continent, then faced front and left it there. My step hitched. That stung, since I was carrying 2 goldstone coins and had assumed a map was a map. I said nothing, because if maps truly ran that high, then arguing would only have made me look poorer. The pavilion she brought me to was 3 stories of plain wood, with no decoration on it anywhere. Only the plaque above the door gave it away, and the plaque read, Heavenly Mandate Pavilion. Inside was packed, everyone murmuring, nobody quite daring to raise a voice. I counted 15 queues, each ending at a door, and the people at each front filed into the rooms one by one. Lee Cheong-han did not join a queue. She walked to a corner of the pavilion where there was another small room, pushed the door open, and went in, and I followed on her heel. The furnishings amounted to a table and a chair. On the table sat a black circular platform, 50 centimeters across, and 3 fingers high, with 7 colored light moving inside it. Standing on the chair was a little girl about a meter tall, and the odd part was that she was not built like a child at all. She heard the door and looked up, and I saw the vertical eyes set in her forehead. Not human, then? She asked, in open surprise why Sister Chong-han was here. I looked at Lee Chong-han with surprise of my own, already calculating whether these two knowing each other could get me out of a queue. Lee Chong-han ignored both our faces. She pointed at me and told the girl, whose name was Seonga, that she was my guide now and that Seonga should simply do her job. Seonga knew that personality well enough not to poke at it, and just told me to come over. I came to the table and waited to be told what to do. She made a small, startled sound instead, then told me I was lucky to carry something like a mermaid heart crystal. My hand went to my forehead on its own, to the blue pattern that surfaced there after I absorbed the thing. That she named it at a glance was unsettling, since even the unfathomable Elder Mock had never known what that pattern was. I did not think this little girl outweighed Elder Mock in strength, which left the third eye as the answer. Lee Chung-han was looking at me differently now too. She had noticed the mark when she first walked up, found nothing strange in it, and written it off as a tattoo. A mermaid heart crystal was no small treasure on the Lord continent. It earned its holder the goodwill of the merfolk, and even command over some of them, a rare weapon at sea. She decided this heavenly mandate lord was not quite ordinary, and kept her face as cold as ever. I did not bother lying, and told her it had been good luck and nothing more. Seonga read that as a closed door and only told me to drip a drop of fresh blood into the heavenly mandate platform, which is how I learned what the black disc was called. My spirit eye did not function inside Chiano City, so until she named it I had been looking at a mystery. I bit my finger and let a drop fall onto the platform. The 7-colored light inside gathered, shifted, and turned gold. Both of them looked up at me at once, and I asked what the problem was. Seonga told me I was a legendary heavenly mandate lord, and the first legendary she had seen all day. There was real admiration in how she said it, and after that she was openly curious about me. Lee Chung-han had gone curious as well, since a legendary heavenly mandate lord is not a thing you meet in the ordinary way of business. For my part, I now knew the heavenly mandate platform read a person's aptitude, though what else it did I had no idea. A square silver token appeared in Seonga's hand out of empty air, the front stamped heavenly mandate token, and the back blank, and she set it into the platform. About 10 seconds later she lifted it out, and writing had appeared across the back. She read it, then asked whether my name was Ha Shin, and I nodded. So the back carried my personal information, and I only hoped it did not carry all of it. She read my name, my level at 9, my profession as Ice Element Messenger, and my survival points at 2,960. A note beside them marked me first among the newcomers. My merit points stood at 3,720 with the same note attached. Her expression climbed slowly into shock and stayed there. There were 1,000 heavenly mandate pavilions across the Destiny Zone, and she had somehow drawn the man sitting at the top of the whole trial, She did not make a scene, since she was not allowed to spill another person's information. She handed the token over and told me to go straight up to the 3rd floor to exchange. Not too much was showing, and judging by how carefully Seonga kept her mouth shut, she could not repeat what she had seen either. I headed for the door hoping the 3rd floor would be empty, because I still meant to reach the Yeonjong Trading Company and put something under the hammer. Behind me, Lee Chung-han had noticed exactly how strangely Seonga behaved, and knowing the rules of the place, she swallowed her curiosity and nodded to the girl, before turning to go. Seonga spoke to her back and told her she ought to get to know him better. Lee Chung-han's step checked for half a beat, then smoothed out, and she gave a small nod, and left the room. Walking behind me, she was suddenly very interested indeed. Seonga did not hand out hints for nothing, so the man in front of her was not a simple one. Her father had punished her by sending her here to work as a guide, and she had arrived planning to sleepwalk through it and go home. Now the day had produced something worth her attention, and it seemed she really would have to get to know him better. I had no idea any of that was happening. The 3rd floor turned out to be one large empty room with nobody in it. Lee Chung-han told me she would wait outside, which I took as courtesy toward my privacy, so I went in alone. There was a long bare table with a groove cut to the exact size of my heavenly mandate token. I set the token in and a light screen unfolded with items and prices running down it. There was a great deal on offer, including a straight conversion of survival points into currency at 10 white stone per point. My whole balance came to 29,600 white stone, which did not impress me since I could pull in that much at home in a day or two. What I settled on were 2 green quality soldier nests at 20,000 white stone for the pair, and that was the first time I had seen soldier nests priced. The prices were brutal. Blue quality nests ran between 100,000 and 300,000 white stone, purple started above 500,000, and gold was not on the list at all. Still, I understood the logic, because a soldier nest is a faucet that never stops pouring soldiers. Standing there, I felt the weight of my 100 transformations talent more clearly than ever. If it ever upgraded far enough to let me name the item I was transforming, I could buy blue nests at blue prices and walk away with purple, or gold on a lucky day. The rest of my points went into commoner summoning cards at 100 white stone each, 96 of them, all white quality. There was no help for it since my territory was due an upgrade and population was the wall I kept hitting. Elder Mok had said other races lived on Hea Island, though he could not tell me where, and once home I needed to find them fast. Bringing them under my banner would ease the shortage better than any summoning card. Lee Chung-han was visibly surprised at how quickly I came back out. I told her I still needed to exchange merit points and asked her to lead. On the road she warned me there were only 10 merit pavilions in the Destiny Zone, and that the crowds would be bad. My scalp prickled. 100,000 people had entered Cheonmo City and there were 10 pavilions between them, which came to 10,000 souls apiece. Then it occurred to me that standing first in merit points might buy me the same courtesy the Heavenly Mandate Pavilion had. She read my face before I said a word. She told me that inside a merit pavilion every Heavenly Mandate Lord stood on the same step. My mood curdled. Queuing honestly would eat the whole day and everything else I had planned would die on the vine, and skipping it meant waiting a month for Cheonmo City to open again. There was, technically, a way to stay in the city, since I carried a property deed for Cheonmo City. Owning a house here at my current strength would have been a curse rather than a blessing, because anyone who wanted it had 100 ways to remove the owner. Lee Chung-han read my expression and worked out that I had other business, since a man with nothing to do does not fret about the clock. She stopped walking and said she had a way to get my merit points exchanged fast. When I asked what way, she told me softly to come outside the Destiny Zone and let her handle the exchange at a different merit pavilion. I went quiet. Inside the Destiny Zone, nothing could touch me, while outside it that guarantee evaporated, and I had known this woman perhaps an hour. If she meant me harm, was auctioning a Soundkill King treasure map worth walking into it. I stared at her, trying to find the angle, and she looked straight back, calm, not shifting an inch. I asked her outright why she was helping me, since we were hardly familiar. Her gaze was as still as well water, and her voice came out clear and cold, like glass touching glass. She told me not to overthink it, since she found me interesting and wanted to build a good connection. I frowned and said I could not measure her strength or influence, but that she was obviously far above me. She heard the suspicion under that and did not blame me, since anyone wonders what a stronger stranger wants when help arrives unasked. Her answer came sideways. She said Heavenly Mandate Lords hold infinite possibilities, and that every great power standing today was founded by one. She was buying my future at a discount, on the theory that I might be worth something later, and the reason was convincing, because I genuinely owned nothing she could want today. She did not know my whole situation either, and then my eyes narrowed. The odds were very good that Seonga had passed her something, since standing first in survival points makes anyone take a second look. I had guessed half of it right. Cheonmo's rules kept Seonga from telling her anything outright. but Seonga had indeed dropped the hint, so I decided to leave the Destiny Zone with her. I needed the funds from the Soundkill King's treasure map to accelerate my territory, and befriending her might shake loose benefits I could not predict. Underneath both, I was simply curious what the world looked like past the boundary line. I smiled and told her I would trouble Miss Lee then. Her face did not move a millimeter, though inwardly she let go of a breath. She still did not know what I was worth, but Seonga would not have prodded her for nothing, and she had been genuinely worried I would refuse. If I turned out to be a treasure, the goodwill would return handsomely, and if I amounted to nothing, she lost nothing, since the favor cost her no effort worth counting. A small stake against a large return was a trade she was happy to make. She told me to come along and pulled a carriage out of her spatial ring, drawn by 2 white horses with white wings. My eyes narrowed, because a spatial ring that stores living creatures does not end up on an ordinary person's hand. She climbed in first, and said walking wasted too much time, and since half the street was already turning to stare, I got in behind her. The horses beat their wings, green cloud gathered under the carriage, and we lifted and flew off, leaving a crowd behind us talking hard. Inside one of the shops on that street, a man with a shopkeeper's look about him leaned toward the man beside him. He told him to go inform the young master, and to say that Lee Chung-han had left the Destiny Zone with a man in her carriage. The other man said he understood, and went. Once I was seated, I asked whether flying inside the Destiny Zone was not forbidden. She told me every place has a privileged class. My face froze, and I let it go, because she was right and there was nothing in it to argue with. I had walked into Cheonmo City assuming nobody would dare bend Cheonmo's will, and now I could see that Cheonmo's will and Cheonmo's rules were not unbreakable walls. I made peace with it fast, and honestly, it excited me more than it bothered me. I wanted to be a free man someday, not a puppet who only moves along the grooves Cheonmo carves. The Lord Continent ran deeper than I had assumed, and there had to be many others standing where the Flower Fairy stood. Next to Lee Chung-han and her kind, I was a weakling who did not even know how large his own world was. She had been watching for my reaction the whole time, and what she got left her blank. There was no resentment in me anywhere. I had been startled for a heartbeat, gone calm, and then something close to eagerness came up in my eyes. She was quietly and thoroughly shocked, and privately she wondered whether the boy simply enjoyed being told he was beneath somebody. I had no idea I was being catalogued. I asked whether she knew anything about the Yeonjong Trading Company, and she turned her head sharply and asked how I knew that name. It was a fair reaction since I had been in this world 1 month and had spent nearly all of it at sea. The Yeonjong Trading Company was one of the 10 great trading companies of Cheonmo City, with holdings here and in large and small worlds besides, and plenty of natives had never heard of it. I told her I had come by an item and learned the name from that. She was curious which item and left it alone, since we were nowhere near close enough for that question and prying would only have soured things. What she did tell me was that the company held a great deal of property here, but that its real business was the auction house. She could introduce me to other companies if I wanted to buy. My eyes lit up, and I said the auction house was exactly what I wanted to see. She read that as a country boy wanting a look at something famous. She said entry required a pass, that she could take me in, and that there happened to be an auction that very afternoon. I kept quiet about the fact that I already had a pass, since walking in under her shadow was likely to save me trouble, and only thanked her warmly. She nodded and said nothing else. This woman treated every word she spoke like it came out of her own pocket. We reached the Merit Pavilion soon after. I told her to hold on a moment, took out 2 items and put them on. She watched with plain confusion and then open surprise, because my face changed and so did my whole frame. The 1000 transformation mask and the 1000 variation clothes did that. I was going to an auction house today, and an extra layer between me and the world sat better with me than none. I told her they were 2 lucky finds and that I was buying a little insurance. She let it go and grew more curious than ever, because I did not carry myself like a heavenly mandate lord who had landed here a month ago. If she had not confirmed what I was with her own eyes, she would have guessed I was some territory's young master out for a stroll. I followed her down into a wide street with a crowd already gathered. Every face turned our way. The talk came in scraps. A pale, bookish sort joked about the beautiful rich woman who rode a heavenly horse, an epic-level monster no less, and wondered aloud whether she needed anyone to wait on her. His companion went white and told him to shut his mouth before he got them both killed, since that was Miss Lee he was joking about. A young woman asked who Miss Lee was, and got told her father was Lee Cheol, one of the 5 great commanders of Cheonmo City. Somebody exclaimed that Lee Cheol was the Ice Thorough Emperor, 18th on the spirit ranking, and that his daughter carried the 9 underworld's ice bloodline. The crowd confirmed among themselves that she was 23 and already a king rank, and the envy went round in circles. One man said his own progress since the general rank crawled like a turtle, and another that his talent was merely excellent and he had never become a hero. I listened and looked at the back walking in front of me with something close to alarm. A king rank past level 18 at 23 years old, carrying a bloodline like that. I had been one wrong word away from a woman who could have erased me without breaking stride. There was no chance her talent sat below legendary, and she had clearly been fed rare treasures her whole life to stack attributes on top. We had barely stepped into the merit pavilion when a middle-aged man in a green robe hurried over and asked respectfully whether she was here to exchange merit. She nodded, called him Manager Wang, and said she had brought a friend and would like it arranged quickly. He promised to take the young master at once and not delay her important business. He was clearly guessing hard at who I was, though his feet never hesitated, and he asked me to follow him. She told me she would wait right there, so I went up the stairs behind Manager Wang, past a queue whose faces ran from bored to envious to openly bitter. Not one of them said a word out loud, since offending Li Chenghan was not a bill any of them could pay. Manager Wang asked me pleasantly who the young master might be. I told him Chenghan and I were friends, and that as for my own identity, I was afraid I could not disclose it. Borrowing her name cost me nothing and shut the question down cleanly. A tiger skin that large is worth wearing. He did not push. He filled the walk with talk about the interesting corners of Cheonmo City, and I listened and said almost nothing. I knew nothing about the place, and every sentence I offered would have proved it. We reached the third floor still trading pleasantries, and he opened a door and invited me in. Manager Wang did not leave after the door closed. He waited outside, still chewing on who I was, because this young master's words had been watertight. What he had picked up sharply was that I did not seem familiar with Cheonmo City at all, which made him wonder whether I had come out of some small world. Inside, I had already started exchanging merit points, and the value nearly knocked me over. 1 merit point was worth a purple stone. My 3,720 merit points came to more than 370,000 white stone, or 37 gold stones, the single largest pile of wealth I had ever held. The first thing I searched for was a map, since knowing the geography of the Lord Continent had become an itch I could not stop scratching. There was not a single map here either, exactly as in the Heavenly Mandate Pavilion. I searched hero class change cards next, and was startled to find them stocked, though the prices took the shine off. A gold quality card ran 100 gold stones and a purple quality card ran 30. I bought neither, because either would have emptied me out and Little Blue would have to be patient a while longer. That left a bad taste. I had promised her and put her off more than once now, and I knew it. I bought professional commoner summoning cards instead. Blacksmiths and doctors and alchemists and the like, all far dearer than the white quality random cards at a floor of 500 white stone apiece. After that, I picked up grain seeds, a few troop layers, and a stack of building blueprints, then converted my last 500 points into 50,000 white stone and closed the account. Coming out, I was surprised to find Manager Wang still standing there. I thanked him for his trouble, and he waved it off and said we should get downstairs quickly, because Miss Li was waiting. Downstairs, Li Chenghan was watching the stairs for me when a commotion outside pulled her attention to the street. A carriage was descending toward the front of the Merit Pavilion, drawn by a divine beast whose whole body burned. She frowned when she saw it and wondered why he of all people had come. The carriage settled and the flames spilled off the beast and shaped themselves into burning steps. The curtain lifted and a young man in a red robe came down them, and behind him came 2 beautiful women in long dresses, one black and one white, keeping close at his heels. He walked up smiling, remarked on the coincidence of finding her at the Merit Pavilion, and asked what she needed to exchange, since perhaps he could help. She was displeased and did not let it show. She told Yunan she appreciated the offer but that he should attend to his own business, which was about as clear a door as anyone could close. He pretended not to hear it, laughed, and told her nothing in his day mattered more than keeping her company. She frowned. Yunan was as shameless as ever, and rather than fight it, she went silent and stopped acknowledging him. He was irritated and also thoroughly used to it. Then he suggested that if she was finished here, they might go over to the Yeonjong Trading Company together, since he had heard there were good things at this auction. Her heart moved, because she knew I was headed there myself later. If she refused him now and then turned up alongside me, every drop of Yeonun's temper would land on my head instead of hers. So she agreed, and added that she needed to wait for a friend. Yeonun knew exactly who the friend was, his people having reported it long before. What surprised him was how much value she placed on one small heavenly mandate lord, which made him wonder whether there was something to the kid after all. He said pleasantly that he would wait and that he was very curious about this friend of hers, then stood there and said nothing more. That silence gave her a bad feeling, and she began wondering what Yeonun was building. Then I came down with Manager Wang beside me. Manager Wang's eyes lit the moment he saw Yeonun, and he sped up and got in front of him. He said it was truly his honor to receive both Yeonun and Miss Li on the same day, and that it was a great destiny. He said destiny rather than blessing on purpose, since everyone in the building knew Yeonun had been chasing Li Chenghan for a long time. The smile on Yeonun's face widened a shade, and Li Chenghan sat with the discomfort and said nothing. I understood at once that this young man was somebody, because Manager Wang did not fawn like that for a nobody. Yun-un wore a red robe worked with gold thread flame patterns, with red hair and even red pupils. He was measuring me at the same time and finding very little. His father was a heavenly mandate lord and a dominant figure sitting 20th on the spirit ranking, while I was a trial taker who might not live out the year. If I had not been standing next to Li Changhan, he would not have registered my existence at all. He asked who I was as though he did not already know, because he did not want her learning he had put people on her. Manager Wang jumped in and introduced me as Ha Xin, young Master Ha, Miss Li's friend, then introduced Yeon-un to me as the son of the West City commander. Another heir writing his father's name. Birds of a feather really do flock together, and the circle of rich sons is nothing but rich sons all the way down. I could not be a second generation, so my only option was to become a first one. I cupped my hands and greeted young Master Yun-un politely. He did not return the greeting. He asked instead what my identity was, since being a friend of Cheonghan's meant something, and Cheonghan did not have many friends. The meaning under that was not subtle. He was asking whether I was worthy of standing where I stood. I heard every ounce of it and disliked all of it. Who I make friends with is nobody's business, and I had not offended this man in any way, if he had opened his account by taking a swing at me. Then I looked at him, and looked at her, and understood the whole picture in one go. I was standing in a crossfire I never volunteered for, because Yun-un had decided I was a rival in love. They were both mountains and I was a scrawny kid who could not fight anyone yet. So I acted deaf to the malice. I said I had happened to meet Miss Li today and had asked her for help with something, and that as for myself, I was nobody worth naming. Getting nothing out of me, Yeon-un dropped it, since pressing further risked annoying Cheonghan. He said he saw how it was, dismissed me entirely, and told her that her friend had arrived and they should go. She had no more appetite for his company than before and no way out of it now, so she nodded and told me to follow her. I smiled and followed her into her carriage. Just before I stepped up, I glanced back at Yun-un, who was still smiling broadly, and felt the cold come up my spine. That one had his eye on me now, and there was no telling what he was cooking. A smiling tiger if I ever met one, and my luck as reliable as ever. Yun-un and his two companions boarded their own carriage, and the two rose one after the other and flew east across Cheonmo City. Manager Wang watched them go and let out a long breath. He had felt every barb traded in front of his counter and had been terrified the two would start something under his roof, which would have been his disaster to answer for. Inside the Flame Beast carriage, Yun-un's face had gone cold and hard with nothing left of the pleasant young man from the street. He asked whether they could find any information on this Ha Xin. The woman in the black dress told him Cheonmo's rules were extremely strict for the first 3 months of the trial and that his information could not be reached. He nodded and said nothing more, his mind somewhere else entirely. I dropped into my seat and told Li Chonghan mournfully that she had landed me in a great deal of trouble. She knew I had been marked because of her, and she felt a little guilty about it, though not very. Her intention had been to help, and this was an accident along the way rather than anything she arranged. She told me not to worry because as long as she was around he would not do anything to me. I asked whether that meant he would move on me the moment she was not. She gave me a look that plainly asked whether I was really that timid. Then she told me the rules of Cheonmo's Heavenly Mandate Lord trial were strict for the first 3 months, and that he could not dig up my information at all. That let a great deal of air back into my chest, since the man had power and backing, and would have flattened me if he chose to. If she was right, I had 2 clear months ahead with no risk of an attack. After 2 months was another question entirely, and retaliation was a real possibility. That put a clock in my head I could hear ticking, and I needed strength quickly, because strength is the only thing that ever makes a man feel safe. Rotten luck. An enemy out of clear sky? For nothing. I shook it off, since none of it was mine to change, and I would deal with whatever arrived when it arrived. Seeing my expression settle, she assumed I had gone careless. She reminded me that after 2 months he might be able to find me, and that I should prepare early, and I told her I understood. Then I asked what a commander actually was, since I had heard the crowd calling her and Yun-un the children of commanders. I asked because I carried an item tied to that word, and I turned it over in my memory while I waited. The Cheonmo Purple Cloud Token, Purple Quality, an identity token for the City Lord's Mansion of Cheonmo City in the Spirit Domain, granting its holder the authority of a commander inside that mansion. She gave me the short version. Cheonmo City was divided into 5 regions: East, West, South, North, and Central, and it was governed by the City Lord's Mansion. That mansion held 5 great commanders, each in charge of one of the 5 capitals and answerable for everything inside Cheonmo City. I asked whether that meant the commanders stood highest after the City Lord himself. She told me it was nothing so simple. The City Defense Army did not fall under the mansion's jurisdiction at all, and the City Lord was not the highest authority here either. She said the situation was tangled, and that understanding it now would do me no good. Then, reading my questions as fear of Yun-un, she suggested we exchange contact information and told me to send word if he moved against me. So Chonmo City was a knot with more strings in it than I could see. Asking more would have made her wonder why I cared, so I stopped there and agreed to the contact information. Whether or not she could shield me from Yon-un, her name and strength alone made her worth having in my list. When a man is far from home, more friends simply means more doors. She asked why I was so set on going to the Yunjung Trading Company. I told her I had no money, so I was certainly not buying anything, and that I was there to auction something. I did not dress it up this time. After the Merit Pavilion, I trusted her a little, and since I knew nothing about the company, I would need her help in the room anyway. She looked surprised and said, carefully, that the Yunjung Trading Company held its auction lots to a very high standard. That made me uneasy, because if my item was beneath their notice, I would look like a fool with a rock in his hand. So I handed it over and asked her whether the thing would even work. She took the bone fragment, turned it over with real curiosity, and read its information. The Soundkill King Tomb Root Map, purple quality. The Soundkill King had been a renowned existence on the Lord Continent during the 7th Heavenly Mandate era, and the location of his tomb had never been known. I had just remembered that Spirit Eye did not work in Cheonmo City, and was opening my mouth to explain when she asked where I had gotten it. She said that purple braid or not, it pointed at the tomb of a king-rank figure, which made it barely worthy of the name fine item at a Yonjong auction. What caught me was that she had read it at all, and I said so. She told me that once the Spirit Eye skill is upgraded and enhanced through certain methods available in a Lord's Manor, it will read item information inside Cheonmo City too. She added that it read item information and nothing else. Then she paused, understood why I had been surprised, and did not remark on it. These people always had a privilege waiting where the rest of us hit a wall. I told her the map had come to me by sheer luck, and that I had come to auction it for funds to develop my territory. She asked lightly whether I had established a territory, and inside she was already sitting up. I said yes, that I had been fortunate enough to come across an island. The confirmation ended any hope she had of staying calm, and now she understood exactly why Seonga had told her to keep hold of me. Founding a territory inside a single month is not something luck explains, and her own father had established his in the first 10 days of the second month of his trial. Then her thoughts caught and turned, because the Heavenly Mandate token did not display territory information at all, only points, merit points, profession, and level. So Seonga had never known about the territory either. Whatever made the girl drop that hint was something else entirely, and the thought raised my value in her eyes another step. She sat there weighing whether to build something closer with me than a passing favor. Being stared at that long made me uncomfortable, and I asked what was wrong. She said she wanted to see what was so different about me, since I kept producing high-quality items out of nowhere. I did not look remotely like a Heavenly Mandate Lord 1 month into the trial. It covered what she was really thinking. I laughed and said maybe Cheonmo simply favored me, since I could hardly tell her the truth was a monstrous talent called 100 transformations. She told me not to worry about the rest, since she would submit the item herself, and had connections there. At the Yunjong Trading Company in the East Capital, the afternoon's auction had the place already packed. Several women in tight light green long dresses stood at the entrance to greet the guests who mattered. 2 of them saw the carriages coming down out of the sky and lit up, since they knew those carriages and what rode in them. Chong Pyonga was the one who stopped short, because a man stepped out of Miss Lee's carriage, and Miss Lee's carriage did not produce men. Lee Chung-han came out behind me, and Chong Pyonga recovered fast. She gave her name softly, and said she was an attendant of the Yonjong Trading Company assigned to receive us, wearing the eager smile of a woman who intended to be useful. Lee Chung-han told her to lead on, since we needed to buy a map. I had already told her in the carriage that I wanted a map of the ground around my own territory. Yun-un came over then and invited Chung-han to lunch first, since the auction would not start until afternoon. She refused flatly and said she needed to help Ha-shin buy some things. He remarked that young Master Ha must have real capital if he was shopping at Yonjong, and asked whether I needed his help. Before I could open my mouth, she refused for me and said there was no need, since she was accompanying young Master Ha herself. Bringing Yun-un along while I bought a map of my own territory would have been the same as handing him a knife. Being turned down twice in a row put a crack in his face and the smile very nearly failed. He said that in that case we would all see one another at the auction, then walked in with his 2 maids behind an attendant of his own. I knew he was carrying a grudge now and did not particularly care, since he could not learn where my territory was in any useful time frame. The inside of the Yunjong Trading Company was a display of wealth all by itself. The center was hollowed into one enormous hall with the staircases running up the outside. 5 floors of them, every floor lined with rooms and people flowing in and out without a pause. Cheong Pyonga introduced it as the Eastern Capital Branch. The 5 floors below belonged to assorted merchants who between them stocked nearly anything a person could imagine. Genuine high-quality goods were sold above the 5th floor in the auction hall, where a pass was required. She glanced at me on that last part, since Miss Lee had been here many times and the tour was for my benefit alone. I told her to take me to the shop that sold maps first. She brought us to the third floor in a spiritual energy lift that ran itself, then into a shop that carried the most complete collection of maps in the company. The place was carpeted in maps of every material and size: bone plates, beast hides, silk, jade, and a dozen things I could not name. Lee Chung-han told Chung Peunga to call an attendant over, and the girl hurried into the back. What came out was a charming woman in a tight red dress, and her laughter arrived before she did. She declared it the humble shop's honor to receive a distinguished guest like Miss Lee. Then she pretended to notice me only at that instant, exclaiming over the second distinguished young master and asking whether this humble woman might know my esteemed name. Business people really do speak a different language. I told her I was Ha Shin, since you do not slap a smiling face, and a name is only a name. She said that so it was young Master Ha, introduced herself as the shopkeeper, said everyone called her shopkeeper Woon, and asked what I needed.